lot of Mandalorian news, actually. So first, we got some Mandalorian books coming up. We've got, how did Ahsoka Tano survive her fight with Darth Vader? And is Thrawn the best villain for the next film? And we pit Lando Calrissian up against Finn on who basically had the greater impact in the Star Wars universe. But first, we're going to see, are we going to get a Mandalorian Season 2 trailer this month? We're going to find out right now.
You're listening to Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars. Begins now.
All right, hello, everybody. I'm Eric Vansel.
And I'm Daryl Sanders.
And we're your hosts for this show. So I really hope that the chat is working this week. We spent a little bit of time, we're trying to figure out some of the things, work out a few bugs, talk to some of the software people. So, hopefully that works out. But how have you been doing this week?
I've been doing pretty well, man. Pretty well. Staying busy. Of course, we're getting all our marching orders from school now. So, all the teachers are pretty much gearing up and trying to, put on their game face and getting ready for the school year. And other than that, just been trying to keep up with some Star Wars stuff.
All right, yeah. Well, there's a lot of Star Wars stuff to actually keep up with this time. I mean, a lot. I mean, it amazes me, actually, how much stuff that, is going on right now.
Yeah, especially in the midst of a pandemic, it's kind of crazy, but...
It is. I think we're actually getting more Star Wars news now than we've had in a long time.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where I think that, everybody's kind of wants to kind of get back into their shows and things like that. Like Umbrella Academy just came back out. Season 2 of that is streaming on Netflix. And so, of course, everybody's clamoring for Mandalorian Season 2. So, we're ready.
Yeah, well, we were going to talk about Mandalorian Season 2. So you ready to do it?
Let's go.
All right. All right, so here we are from a certain point of view. This is our main topic for the day. Well, actually, for the week.
Yeah, man. So I was kind of scrolling around on the internet, and there's been a lot of talks about the Mandalorian Season 2 trailer. A lot of people wanting to know when it's going to come out. Of course, last year, when we got the trailer for the Mandalorian Season 1, that was kind of released around August 23rd, I believe. So... a lot of people have been claiming, and I think Disney just kind of did their quarterly thing. So usually that's when they usually drop a lot of big announcements and whatnot. So everybody's been talking about they believe the Mandalorian trailer Season 2 was going to be dropping really soon. When I text you about it, it was actually supposed to be either that day or the next day. But now I'm hearing reports that it's actually going to be closer to between August 21st and the 23rd. Which kind of makes sense because we know Star Wars is a big sports fan. And usually when they drop trailers, it's usually doing Monday Night Football. So in this case, they're doing it in the NBA playoffs since the NBA has resumed again.
Okay, well, that's interesting. Because I was wondering, where did you actually get this news from?
Yeah.
Because I remember when you first brought it up to me, I was like, well, wait, I didn't really hear anything. And that's not strange. I mean, it's not strange for me not necessarily to hear about something right away because obviously I don't have as much time as I would like to in order to, chase down everything. But it amazes me, though, because I'll send you articles and stuff like that, or, some website will have something and I'll send it to you. And it's just, it seemed like every day I was like, oh, I got to send this to Daryl. Oh, I got to send this to Daryl. And it's like, there just seems to be all this stuff. I'm like, it's funny that you bring it up, too, with COVID, because here we are in the midst of a pandemic where production has essentially shut down, and yet we're getting all this Star Wars news.
Well, there's actually something that I got to actually get a chance to look at it, but they've actually been addressing that, where Hollywood's actually talking about how they're going virtual in the midst of this pandemic and how they're kind of learning how to shoot around some things and use technology to their benefit to kind of still pump out shows, pump out programming, for fans and whatnot. So this trailer, though, I mean, a lot of people, of course, are clamoring about it. People want to see, of course, what's to come. And, of course, everybody's heard all the different speculations. But one of the main things everybody wants to know is the release date. We know we're hearing October, but October what? It's 31 days in October. So which one does it kick off?
Yeah, well, that's really it. Because one of the things that I've noticed, and again, I get the pandemic part of it. I get the fact that that's going to affect certain things, and you can't hold everybody responsible for shifting timelines. I mean, look at Top Gun.
Yeah, I heard that's even changed again.
Oh, yeah, it has.
Now it's 2021, right?
Right. It's like June or July of 2021. So, first it was supposed to come out like last month or something.
Mm-hmm.
And then it got shifted to December.
Right.
And now it's gotten shifted again to June. And you can't blame these guys because, I mean, it's one of those things where they essentially have no choice but to move the stuff forward a lot of times. So in the Star Wars universe, where if you think about it, they've got all these different things, it doesn't really surprise me that they haven't been forthcoming about when a trailer could drop. So this is why I was really shocked that there's been any kind of a rumor or anything as far as when this trailer is gonna hit.
Well, that's the thing with Star Wars too, and we've always often talked about it on the show. And as far as different things, but the marketing of Star Wars is one of the bigger things that we always kind of come back to. And most notably, the Han Solo gaffe that they waited basically like 3 weeks before the movie released, and then they want to start, doing the publicity for it. But I think for something like Mandalorian, of course, with it being such a huge success, you want people to actually remember, okay, we need you to come back to this, and it's a hit show, so you don't want to kind of just spring it on people. Mm-hmm. You kind of want to get people kind of primed for it. So one of the things I want to talk about is, what do you expect to see, or what do you want to see in the trailer?
Well, okay, so those are two different things. What I expect to see and what I want to see.
Exactly.
I mean, I want to clarify right now, because obviously not everything that I would expect to see, I'm going to see. I get that. I know that up front. I understand. I really want to see a live-action Ahsoka in the trailer.
Okay.
I want to see a little bit. I also want to see a little bit more context. So in other words, one of the things I understand for season 1.
Now, this is probably the teaser trailer.
Yeah, but
I mean, the official.
And
trailer.
I know it's only going to be like 30 seconds, but you could still at least shape, because the last season had 8 episodes?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, with only 8 episodes, and each one was like 20 minutes? I mean, a 30-second teaser trailer is a little bit more weighty. Well, granted, okay, I get it. Like, a movie's only hour and a half, 2 hours long. So I understand that part of it. But I think that you could still convey a little bit about the overall scope of the show, right? Like, you don't have to give me a bunch of detail. You don't have to give me a lot of plot points, because, like you point out, that's really more for what you would expect to see in, like a full-length trailer, right? And, like, maybe a trailer too. Usually what happens is a teaser trailer just gives you an overall feel for what you might see. It doesn't really give a whole lot of detail or anything like that. It's images. It's just a little bit to just kind of introduce you into the world of whatever the movie is.
It's the appetizer. It's
pretty much exactly, or an hors d'oeuvre or something. The first trailer starts to give you a little bit more context to what you saw in the teaser trailer, and then of course the second trailer number 2 for anything, is generally when you're going to start seeing a lot more detail, a little bit more story arc, stuff like that. So, I don't know. I think that I would like to see a little bit of the worlds that they're going to visit.
Okay.
I'd like to see Ahsoka.
Okay.
Like, you don't have to show me doing it. I just want to see what she's going to look like. I want to see Rosario Dawson.
As Ahsoka.
Exactly, as Ahsoka. And then I'd like to see Boba Fett, if he's going to be in there. Like, just show me each of the characters and show me a little bit about where they're at, what they look like, some overall expectations, things like that. That's all I really would want to see. Now, what do I expect to see? What I expect to see is a bunch of ambiguous images, some Mandalorian stuff, and I think that what they're going to do is they're going to go through a bunch of different sequences, pretty much, right? And then that last little 2 or 3 seconds or whatever, that's when they're going to drop something. Because if you remember, the Baby Yoda thing was a total secret.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to bring up. Yeah, because
I kind of figured you, because I could see the look on your face a little bit, and I'm like, you know what? I wonder if he's going to point out to me that we knew nothing about Baby Yoda. That was like the biggest.
Yeah, that was the big bomb. And that's the thing, though, and that's what people. There's an article that I'm looking at, and this is kind of like what fans have kind of been collaborate as far as what they would like to see in the trailer. So, of course, they want to see some Baby Yoda, but not too much. They brought up the fact that, yeah, that was like the hook that no one saw coming. And that's why the surprise worked, was because no one knew that, we were going to get like a Baby Yoda, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is they don't want to have too many characters revealed. So there's been speculation about Boba Fett, and a lot of people pretty much said, it's pretty much happening.
See, that's where I think there's a difference. Because in the beginning, we didn't know anything about this.
Right.
Now we already, not only do we have season 1 behind us, but we've read all this stuff. Like, it's no secret. It's almost like leaving Palpatine out of Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah, it's like, out the trailer.
Yeah.
It's kind of like what we know.
Now, granted, you're right. All they did was do the voice or the laugh, I think, in the teaser, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, see, that's because we didn't know prior to, though. We didn't know prior to they were bringing Palpatine back. We didn't know that until the trailer.
Well, but, okay. That's true, because it did come out
because everybody was just like, whoa.
And then he's like, roll it again, or whatever.
Well, at the very end, you hear the laugh, and you're just like, wait, is that Palpatine? And everybody's just like, no way. But that's because, there was no information about Rise of Skywalker. They were very tight-lipped about that aspect of things.
Mm-hmm.
So so the characters, now, if they're going to have some characters that are not going to be, that we don't know about, like they're rumored, such as, let's say Sabine pops up, or some people even talked about like Anakin Skywalker pops in, I'm saying, like, okay, you don't want to see that in the thing because you just kind of want it to happen. There's talks, but you don't know. So things like that would be cool. Darksaber footage. So, of course, everybody wants to see the Darksaber. So if you're going to bring up the Darksaber, I feel like you have to bring up Ahsoka at that point. Because, like, you got to have, like, who's going to battle with the Darksaber? The Mandalorian, I don't think he has anything in his arsenal that really can deal with that. So, the Darksaber would be one. Of course, the official release date. And, of course, people don't want to wait another month for the actual trailer. So we're all thinking that we're getting it this month. We don't want to wait a whole nother month, which would be September, which would be too close, because if it drops in October.
Exactly.
Now
it's supposed to drop in October. Yeah.
You got the Solo problem again.
Right. So, to me, it would stand to reason that I think that the season 2 trailer could actually come sooner than the end of August.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. I think that because
I know that's what some people have been saying.
What, the full trailer?
Yeah, well, the teaser even.
Oh, the teaser, yeah, that definitely has to probably happen this month.
Well, there wasn't the early rumors that it was going to happen like this past Tuesday.
Yeah,
wasn't what they were starting to, because that was that meeting that you were talking about, the shareholders.
The shareholders meeting, and then we thought that after that they were going to like release the Kraken, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
But like I said, to maximize it, it makes more sense to drop it during the middle of the beginning of the NBA playoffs. So that starts August 21st, I believe.
Yeah, I get it, because you do have to maximize your audience.
Yeah, and
the problem is they don't have any theatrical releases now where they could put a trailer before it. So now you have to figure out, it's even more important now, where do I put this in the grand scheme of things? Because that's one of the things that's an even broader discussion, though, about trailers. How important do you think trailers are at this point in movie history?
Honestly, like, I'm one of those guys, like, I'm old school, I still like getting to the theater early to see the trailers for stuff, because there's some things, like, yes, granted, most of the trailers end up online anyway, and if you're just scrolling and looking for stuff, or somebody might send you a link, but sometimes some things just kind of slip past you, so until you go to a movie, I'm like, oh wow, like, there's been times you and I have gone to the show, and I'm like, oh wow, that's coming out, you're like, oh yeah, man, they released that like 3 weeks ago, and I'm like, oh, I didn't see it. So, you have that aspect of it, but I think trailers are still important. I think they still, because it still kind of motivates you to see a movie. So sometimes, or a TV show. So some things you'll see it and you're like, man, yeah, that looks good. Just from that 30 seconds or a minute, you're like, yeah.
You know what? That. I will actually vouch for that, because there have been some movies. Well, here's a perfect example. Another movie that's been delayed several times, Black Widow. I wasn't really all that big on the Black Widow movie. You know, it was kind of like, I mean, don't get me wrong, I like the character and everything, but a standalone film,
Yeah.
I was like, I don't know, I don't really care so much about that. I was like that with Ant-Man, too.
Yeah.
Until, in each instance, this is the same thing, until I saw the trailer. And when I saw the trailer, I have to admit, I'm like, you know what? This actually looks kind of cool. I might go check this out.
And that's the thing. Like, sometimes you kind of wonder, like, okay, you know, do I really want to see this? Do it, you know? And I know how I felt like, you know, when they made in the second Ninja Turtles series, I guess.
You talking about like the remake one?
The remake one, yeah, the one they have out now, basically.
Didn't you hate the
Yes.
first movie?
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. Like, when I first, because I was like, okay, they do another Ninja Turtle movie. Cool. I want to see what it looks like. Once I saw how they were doing, I'm like, man, I don't know about this. And then I saw the trailer. I was like, yeah, I'm really not. But I'll go see it. And then I saw it. I was like, yep, I was right the first time.
Well, that's kind of how everybody reacted to Fantastic Four, too.
Yeah.
If you remember, everybody was like, this movie. Now, again, the first one, the Ryan Reynolds, he was the one that played Human Torch, right?
Yeah.
Pretty sure, yeah. So this is one of those instances where I actually like those movies. Because it was that and Rise of the Silver Surfer. I thought those were cool. I never actually, I don't think I saw the remake, the one that everybody said was terrible.
The one with, who's that who played it wasn't Michael B. Jordan who played the Human Torch? Or somebody, I forgot.
You know what?
Who it was.
That movie, it was so abysmally rated. It's one of the few times that I actually paid attention to all the reviews and stuff because it was, nobody liked that movie. And that was kind of, usually I'm the guy that says, you know what, everybody hates it. I'm going to check it out because there's a lot of movies, even with Star Wars. There's a lot of movies that people, like for instance, most people will put Phantom Menace below Attack of the Clones, and I'm the opposite.
Well, I will say, like, the Phantom Menace trailer was awesome.
Yes.
The trailer for that was awesome.
It tricked us all.
Well, I mean, of course, that's the first time you see Maul, too, and you're just like, whoa, okay.
Well, funny story about that, I thought Maul was a expanded universe character by the name of Prince Zizor.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about, yeah.
Because he had, the way that they described him in the book, he kind of had that same, it was a little different, but I'm like, oh, no way, did they bring this guy out? And and then it turns out, of course, he's a completely different character. Lucas was still ignoring the expanded universe at that time. You know, he didn't start bringing people in until, like Attack of the Clones, I think, is when we started seeing a couple of characters, you know, even though he did totally destroy the entire backstory of Boba Fett in the process, but we'll let that go.
By the way, what's going on, Ronaldo? Good to have you with us.
Oh, hey, Ronaldo. Yeah, chat's still not working here, guys. But you know what? Daryl's monitoring it, so we're good. It's the same thing.
Yep, see you guys on YouTube. So, with the trailer...
I know you keep trying to get it back to the trailer, don't you?
Because I'm like, okay, do we... Okay, so...
Did I go through my expectations?
Yeah.
All right, just checking.
Do you think that... we're going to see like any battles, like as far as like with Ahsoka
in the trailer?
Yeah.
You know what? I don't. Okay, I think we're gonna see some action, and this could include battles, but I'm not entirely sure that we're gonna see anything significant.
Okay.
The reason being is it goes back to what you were saying, is that you have a very real. Probably a Baby Yoda moment in season 2. I'm sure of it.
Yeah.
In fact, I'm sure there's probably multiple ones. I don't think it's going to be just one thing like it was at that point. I mean, there's a couple still that they pulled on us in season 1, but nothing as earth-shattering as another Yoda species.
Yeah, man, I don't think that. I think something's going to pop up that's from the original trilogy. I think that might be something that could actually happen.
What I worry about, though, is almost the whole Tim Burton Batman syndrome, where you start to just jam in too many things, you know, and especially if you think about it, because what are we looking at here? We're looking at probably 25 minutes. What was the longest? Well, actually, I think the season finale was something like 50 minutes or something. But, I mean, it averaged around 25.
Yeah.
You know, and it just worries me that if they start trying to jam too much, how are you going to tell all these stories in like 8 20-minute episodes?
Well, I mean, I'm thinking either they may actually make more episodes, or they may actually extend the ones that we have. Which, to me, honestly, I would rather extend the actual episodes. So instead of making like 20 minutes, I would rather make them like 40 or 45. If you're gonna do that, just so that you can actually kind of get in. And maybe, like I said, because Mandalorian season 1 was like the first thing, maybe they were just kind of being a little cautious of it, and they just didn't know how it was going to take. And then maybe now that they've seen, okay, yeah, this whole Baby Yoda thing is taking off, because even their marketing for that, like they held back a lot of their marketing of the Mandalorian as far as like actual physical media or products, because they didn't want to give away the Baby Yoda thing. So,
yeah.
So I think like if they kind of keep those things, and like I said, you have Filoni and Favreau at the helm. I think that with their knowledge of stuff, I think they're going to keep people on their toes with a lot of different things.
Well, what I would like to see, and I'm hoping maybe we see this a little bit in the trailer, what I would like to see is maybe a faster pace season. Because if you think about it, they were trying to do a lot of world building and a lot of setup in the first season, and I think that the whole show would benefit if it moved along a little quicker. And that's not necessarily taking anything away from season 1. I don't want anybody to think that, I hated season 1 or I thought it was boring. I didn't. I'm just saying that if you look at some of the episodes, primarily the first one.
The first, probably 2.
Yeah, first couple, because 3 was when it really started to pick up. Yeah, and I think it was 5. Is that the one they went to Tatooine? I'm pretty sure season 5, episode 5, or chapter 5, actually, if I'm being technical.
Yeah, I think it might have. No, that might actually come later. That might have been like.
Because 6, I think, was the heist one. And then 7 and 8 were the 2 concluding ones.
Oh, yeah.
So.
The heist one was, of course, my.
The heist one.
That was awesome.
And that's my point. The heist one. The Deborah Chow ones.
Yeah. But even the one they went to that like Vietnamish looking country.
Sure. Now that was actually a good. That was a good balance though.
With Gina Carano on that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a good balance. That almost reminds funny because a lot of people said this too. That kind of reminded me of a Star Trek episode, like a total Next Generation thing.
Yeah.
I could see that. It kind of had an insurrection vibe actually.
Ronaldo said, did you see the fake trailer from the IGN that came out some months ago? It was so funny. And I don't think I saw that one.
I did.
Did you?
Yeah, I did. I did. It was, and that's the thing. This is another thing, since we're on the subject of trailers. It is really driving me nuts because people are starting to put together more official-looking trailers. I mean, it's getting a little bit more difficult. And I'm in this business, and it's getting a little bit more difficult now to actually differentiate. You have to look at where they come from now.
Yeah, you really do have to like look. I mean, unless it's coming from like Star Wars official, then
exactly.
That's about the only way you can really know for sure.
And some of them are really cool, but I mean, I hate that because sometimes the way that they'll word it in their title, again, clickbait, right? Which I try to stay away from with our show, but and God bless them, they do it. So I'll click on the thing and I'm watching it, and I'm going, oh man, this is awesome. This is awesome. And then, of course, halfway through, I'm like, not really seeing anything, or what they'll do is they'll cut in like video game footage or something to make it seem new, along with whatever the previous season or seasons were. And drives me nuts.
Yeah, definitely.
So, yeah, I saw it because it fooled me for
like 2 seconds.
Yeah, a few seconds. And then I was kind of like, oh yeah. But that's one of the things on the broader subject of trailers that's actually happening a lot is you're getting these fan-made trailers, and some of them aren't so obvious anymore.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what I'm saying. But even like a lot of, some of the fan-made films are cool. Sometimes I wish like, man, Lucasfilm need to hire these guys and actually have them tell some like these one-off stories or whatever, because this is actually interesting. Especially that one, the Shards of Darkness, or the one with Vader. The one we all love, and they left off when he's walked into the temple and he was supposed to fight Mace Windu.
Oh, yeah,
that one, like that.
Yeah,
that was
sweet.
That
you're talking about the one where the Emperor ended up choking out Vader, right?
Yeah,
yeah.
That one. Now that one.
Well,
was sweet.
But now that was actually a fan-made movie.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like Lucasfilm probably needs to hire those guys to kind of do some of these one-off or like a series or something like that, because they can tell some good, cool stories. I mean, the cinematography and some of that's kind of sketchy, but but for what it's worth, like for what they have, they do a pretty good job with it.
They do, and the problem is they actually have to raise money to make these things.
Yeah.
And of course, that's why it takes a long time, because it's not like they have studio backing.
Exactly.
In a lot of these other cases, they actually have studio backing.
Yep.
So, again, and it's the same thing with these trailers. Sometimes people actually go and make brand new footage.
Mm-hmm.
And where they're getting the, it's funny because people were like, oh, where are they getting these costumes from or whatever? It's like, well, look at all the cosplayers out there.
Exactly.
It's like,
yeah,
trust me, these guys are really good at what they do.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
But do you think in the teaser trailer, I don't know, I don't see Boba Fett appearing.
No, I don't think they're going to show Boba Fett. I think that's just going to be, even though people know you kind of want to have people guessing as far as when he's going to come in. You might even just hear his voice or something like that. Like, that would be cool. It's like, or, so you're the Mandalorian or something like that, and it's like Boba Fett's voice or something like that.
Well, it's going to be, I don't know, it's going to be interesting to me to see what they do, because on one hand, you don't want to pretty much like drop every bomb that you have. You want to keep something as a surprise for the audience, right? Because nobody can forget almost where they were when the Baby Yoda moment happened, and it blew everybody's minds, and it did exactly what it was designed to do. It got everybody talking.
Yeah.
Suddenly, everybody was into the Mandalorian all of a sudden.
Yeah, and that was the one thing that they talked about, is that it went from a great show to like an amazing show. Just
to a phenomenon.
Yeah, exactly. Because now you have people who weren't even Star Wars fans watching The Mandalorian just because they fell in love with Baby Yoda. Now all of a sudden you got memes all over the place. Now you've gotten
exactly.
merchandise. You got people wearing like Baby Yoda like face masks now during the pandemic. It's crazy.
It's so funny, man. On the Star Wars chat boards and stuff like that, or some of the Facebook groups I'm a part of, it's like there were people who were actually angry at these pseudo fans, basically. It's like, oh, you're just into it because of all the Baby Yoda stuff. You don't really love Star Wars. And it goes and
the bullying.
Typical fan toxicity. But it really did amaze me, though, that it did create that kind of phenomenon. There's people that didn't know anything about Star Wars, and they're wearing Baby Yoda T-shirts all over the place.
Yeah. Because girls wear it just because they think he's cute, and it's like, oh, it's a cute little.
And that was a stroke of genius on Lucasfilm's part.
Absolutely,
honestly.
Yep, Favreau and all them, and then of course that's it gets people's attention from, because people always just kind of looked at Yoda as like the old grandpa, and so he's kind of cute within it itself. But then now you have an infant version of him, and then on top of that, for the Star Wars fans, we're like, whoa, another Yoda species that's that young, like we've never seen that. And then of course,
especially when he starts using the
Force. Yeah, I was just about to say, like, now we're like, wait a minute, like, how do you?
Well, the funniest thing was when he actually force choked the Cara Dune character.
Oh yeah,
I was like, hey, Yoda wouldn't do that. I mean, now you're starting to see differences. Hey, maybe this one isn't quite as peaceful. He's out there eating everything in sight,
Well, you got to think about it. And that was a cool thing about, and that's one of the things I loved about The Mandalorian, is that when they show Baby Yoda, it's really just no different than an actual child. It really acted and behaved like a child.
Sure, somebody was threatening
somebody that he thought is a parent or something, and he's just angry. He doesn't know how to express it, but the Force just kind of responded on his behalf, really. And that's what you got.
But see, that goes into what I've been saying about this trailer. Now, so they have this phenomenon on their hands.
Mm-hmm.
So if you think about it, they really have to be very calculated about what they present, because more so than even the full trailers, believe it or not. Because if the problem is this is going to be our first glimpse into the world of Season 2.
Mm-hmm.
And they have to keep the momentum going. And the last thing that they want to do is to do something that breaks the momentum.
Now, we last left Mandalorian. They were on their way to try to take Baby Yoda back to his homeworld. So do you think, like you said, you want to see them introduce the worlds? Do you think we're going to see that in the trailer?
Here's what I think. I think we might see it, but we're not going to know it's Baby Yoda's homeworld.
Okay.
See, because you could present the stuff in all kinds of ways. Look at Oh, man, they did, well, of course, a Rogue One trailer, half the trailer wasn't even in the movie. But the thing is, what they'll do is they'll actually take certain things out of context.
Yeah.
Like they might take a character saying a line of dialogue, and then they'll splice it with another character answering it, but they really weren't even in a scene together. It was taken from another part of the movie. But again, it's all the psychology of it.
Yeah.
They want to
Create that angst and that build.
They want to build, but what they also want to do is create pretty much a story that you think might happen and then surprise you by the fact that, oh, no, that was out of context. It's really something else. And that's something that they've been doing in trailers for a long time.
Yep.
Well, maybe not in the early days, because the interesting thing is if you look at the evolution of movie trailers, it's really interesting how it went from, just being a very pedestrian, mundane, here's a few clips from the film.
So it's funny because you bring that up. So just last night, I watched the original trailer because I never saw it, but I saw the original trailer of Top Gun.
Oh, really?
So I'm watching this and I'm like,
Speaking
really?
of Top Gun.
And I was like, really? Like this is the trailer back in like 86 or 87?
86.
And I'm like, wow. Okay. And then after I watched that, I watched the Maverick one. And I'm like, yeah, this is two completely different. Just the way they tell the story is kind of like.
And even if you look at 80s trailers versus 90s trailers, there was a definite step up. Mm-hmm. And you can see if you just go by decade and just go each decade, say starting from, let's say the 40s or 50s. Yeah. And continue up. You'll see an evolution.
Yeah, I missed like Don LaFontaine, doing the voice of two in a world where just him narrating a lot of stuff. Like he did all the movie trailers pretty much.
Well, I mean, even if you look at the original Star Wars, the one that I used to joke about all the time, where it was some weird phantom voice like Star Wars or some weird. I mean,
like somebody on the acid trip or something.
It was the weirdest thing. Like you would never know what this movie was based on that trailer, and you wouldn't. I mean, if I saw that trailer, it would not necessarily make me want to go see it. It was a teaser trailer. If you ever look it up, it's hilarious. In fact, one of the things that I want to start doing with this show is actually putting in, like if we're talking about something, actually play what I'm talking about. Gotcha. A lot of times our conversations are somewhat spontaneous. But if there's something in there that I think that we might say, it'd be cool to have the example.
Yeah.
I wouldn't mind doing an actual reaction video to the Mandalorian Season 2 trailer when it drops.
Yeah.
But, we'll have to see. But that's why I think that with this trailer, they have to be really careful about how they present that because, like I said before, this is our first glimpse into that world. So on one hand, unlike Season 1, we know the world of the Mandalorian. We know the characters of the Mandalorian. It's not this big shrouded mystery anymore.
Right.
So they can show us more.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I really think Season 2 is really going to open up now because now we've had some things established. We kind of know the Mandalorian, what he's kind of doing, why. We don't necessarily know why he's doing it, but it's his profession. We kind of know that he has a heart. We see some things in his personality. We see that, okay, now he's kind of like in this whole situation now with Moff Gideon, which we have to expand him a whole lot in Season 2.
Well, yeah. I mean, when you end the season with him holding the Darksaber, I mean, first of all, this is where it gets interesting because a number of the people that watch The Mandalorian have no idea what that is.
Right.
They just think it's like a black lightsaber or something or some
weird
different
sword.
weapon.
Yeah. Like a vibroblade or something.
Right. They really have no idea the significance of it. But any of us that have been watching the Clone Wars,
Read
and then
the books
especially
and stuff,
Rebels.
Yeah. Yep.
And then, like you said, reading the books and comics, we know exactly what that is. So you can't just throw that out there and not do anything with it.
You got to address that.
Well, and he even basically said in interviews, right, that we're going to find out a lot more, and he may even be force sensitive or whatever.
Or how he even,
how did he get it?
How did he get it? And like I said, they even made talks that the original lightsaber is going to we might actually find out how Maz got Luke's lightsaber in The Mandalorian this season.
I do kind of like the fact that they're using The Mandalorian to patch up little plot holes in the saga.
Yeah.
in a way, it's a cheap move. It is. I mean,
But it works,
I'm going to call it what it is. It's a little bit of a cheap move. But at the same time, I do think that it actually works in the favor of the storytelling.
Yeah.
Because it is the perfect vehicle to tell these little nuggets of, you know, they've done it in the comics too. But obviously, The Mandalorian has a wider audience.
Sure. But, you know, what does everybody else think, though?
Yeah. I mean, what do you think? What do you think we're going to see? Again, they really do have to be very calculated. Not so much with obviously, they got to do it with all the trailers. But, I mean, they don't necessarily have to be as much with the full-length trailers. Mm-hmm. But with the teaser, though, it's going to be our first look into it. Yeah. That's why I think you can see... Look, we all know Ahsoka's going to be in it. Mm-hmm. They've announced who's playing Boba Fett. I mean, it's not like we don't know he's going to be in it.
Right.
They can show us little quick glimpses of these people because what that'll do is that'll get you excited, but you're not really giving anything away. Mm. You know, it's not... If I see Boba Fett walking down a corridor, let's say, mm-hmm. I don't know what he's doing.
Yeah, it's just the Fett light.
But you're seeing him.
Yeah.
And that gets you excited about it. It's no different. Now, of course, they did this with The Rise of Skywalker. They did it in probably like one of the last trailers where you see the back of the Emperor or something like that. Mm-hmm. But again, that's because you didn't really see the Emperor a whole lot even in the film.
Right.
If you think about it, you heard him, you saw him in the shadows or whatever, but it wasn't like they had all these close-ups of him. It wasn't until the end.
That's true.
But I'm really curious about this. I'm really curious about when they're going to do it because, again, you do bring up a really good point when it's like, look, don't do the Solo problem again.
You can't do
know?
That.
It's like,
especially when it's already caught fire, major fire. Like Mandalorian is like the hot show.
Sure, and my biggest issue
is 15 nominations. I mean, that should tell you right there.
Yeah,
so it's like,
like we covered last week, like 15 Emmy nominations. I mean, that's another thing. When's the last time that anything Star Wars related has been up for a ton of awards? You know, you can't screw this up.
Exactly.
And my problem is, what are you going to do? Are you going to, like, the last 3 weeks give us, like, a trailer every Tuesday or something? I mean, you know, you got to space this out. I mean, in my mind, unless they felt that COVID was actually going to endanger the production schedule, and who knows, maybe that's what's played into it, they should have been working on this. We should have had a teaser, maybe back in July.
Okay, I can see that.
I would have done a teaser in July, then, like, maybe the first full length sometime in late August, early September, and then maybe late September, early October do another full length one, and then do obviously a bunch of TV spots leading up to it.
Gotcha.
But again, it also depends on whether or not you have Disney Plus or not, and that's another thing. Is that in a way they almost have to promote it along with the subscription to Disney Plus.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people just got Disney Plus, honestly, now because of Hamilton. Like, Hamilton did really well, and everybody wanted to, like, check that out. And so, you know, but that's one of the things, you do make up a good point that, you know, you have to make sure folks have Disney Plus to watch it.
Now, granted, well, but again, you know, talking about the Hamilton thing, originally that everybody got it because of The Mandalorian.
Yeah, I mean, that's why we got
definitely,
it. Yeah, that's why we got it.
That's true. That's true. If they had shown it on Disney XD or whatever, I wouldn't have gotten Disney Plus.
Exactly.
I mean, it's cool. Don't get me wrong. I like it. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, unfortunately, though, I switched to Comcast Flex because, you know, I had the Fire Stick or whatever. But then when I got Comcast Internet, it's like I switched to their Flex, and they don't carry Disney Plus.
Oh, wow.
They do carry Peacock, though. But not Disney Plus, and it just drove me nuts because it's like, okay, I guess when Mandalorian comes in, I got to hook the Fire Stick back up or whatever. But again, you know, what do you guys think? You know, while we're live, you can obviously chat in. Daryl's monitoring it.
Yep.
The Twitch works for some weird reason. It's just YouTube. That's where all our viewers are basically. We have a few on Twitch, but YouTube is our main thing. But again, you guys can chat in. We'll see it. It's cool. Let us know what you think. What do you think is going to be in the trailer? What do you expect to be versus what you want to be in the trailer? And when do you think the trailer is going to drop? Let us know. All right, you ready to do a little bit of battle?
Hey, man. Ready
to
strap.
Let's do it. What do we got?
All right. Next, we have Duel of the Fates. All right, so this week we're going to talk about which character had the greater impact, Lando Calrissian or Finn.
This is really, I know I've been saying this so much every week, but this one is a pretty decent matchup. And it again, I'm going to go for Lando.
Okay.
I'm just going to put it out there right now. I'm not going to do my usual paragraph-long intro about how clever your thing was or anything like that. I'm just going to say
I always look forward to those.
I know. I'm sure. I'll send you an email. But I'm going to put it out there right now that Lando, hands down.
And Lando, hands down.
Hands down. But here's a couple of notes, okay? Number one, Lando's had more time to be. Because, first of all, even from a chronological movie release point of view, we first see him in The Empire Strikes Back.
Mm-hmm.
Then he plays a prominent role in Return of the Jedi. Then he's like the star or a pretty prominent character in like a gazillion books and comics. Then we finally see him in the final film of the
Rise of Skywalker.
of the actual saga. So he's done a lot. But again, if you're looking at it in universe-wise, and again, I know this is unfair a little bit to the Finn character because, number one of our complaints about the sequel trilogy is he's kind of a wasted character. They could have done so much more with him, but they didn't. But if you factor in all the new canon stuff, because I'm not just talking about the 3 movies, I mean the books, the comics, he's actually been in quite a lot of stuff. And if you guys haven't read the comics, I highly recommend it. I just finished the latest Darth Vader one. The Star Wars one just dropped a few days ago. I haven't had a chance to read it.
Right.
And they're really good. But I just think if you look at overall the effect on the rebellion, remember, Finn spent half the time trying to run away from everything.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about Lando is he kind of he kind of had a Han moment, you know. It's like he wasn't really initially trying to be a part of this. I mean, he was actually trying to stay out of the Empire's hair, honestly. And the only reason why he got involved, unfortunately, was because Han and them showed up. I don't even think the Empire would have bothered with Bespin if Han and them hadn't showed up. So that whole situation kind of brought Lando into the fray, and then.
Well, then he felt guilty.
Yeah, then he felt guilty.
Because it was a little different than Han just felt obligated because he saw all this stuff going on, and he was like, you know what, I can't just bail on these guys. They're going to, you know. But with Lando, it was a little different because he essentially sold out his friend and you know, his friends.
Innocent people, yeah.
And innocent people. And it's like, okay, well, you know, I got to make up for this.
Yeah, exactly. And I just think that, you know, and the cool thing about, you know, The Rise of Skywalker was the fact that Lando kind of had that moment with Finn. You know, he was like, man, you know, I don't got to see how you guys did. He's like, look, we didn't have the answers. You know
what? As dopey and corny as I know a lot of people think that is, it's one of my favorite scenes in the movie.
Yeah, because, he was just it was like a moment of honesty and transparency. Like, we weren't trying to be heroes. We were just like, look, this is our situation, you know.
Yeah, they were trying to survive.
Yeah, basically it was like, look, we didn't.
They were presented with a bunch of situations, and they had to just do the best they could
with what they had. Yeah.
With what they had to get out of them. And it, unfortunately, you know, it was one of those situations where they could have chosen the wrong, meaning morally wrong decisions. I mean, not everything was life and death. Some of the stuff they had the opportunity to get out. Lando certainly could have.
Well, let's look at some of the things Lando did. Okay, so of course we know about the setup that he did, you know, trapping Han and Leia and everybody on Bespin.
Well, wait a minute though. Do you really want to start there, or do you want to go back to Solo?
No, I'm gonna start Empire. I mean, I could go back to Solo, but I think I'm saying like the whole gist of the whole saga.
Well, yeah,
thing,
I mean, because honestly, that was just sort of the origins. Lando wasn't really actively involved in any kind of a fight. He really started throwing his chips in, so to speak, to use his own.
No pun intended.
Yeah, to use his own thing when he was actually like, look, I'm going to join up with these guys.
Yeah.
I'm going to fight for a cause. I'm not going to just.
Yeah, and I think where Finn the age Finn was is the same time. I guess you can kind of compare that to where Lando was in Solo, like age-wise.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what separates the two is the fact that, like, Lando was older. He had more responsibility. He was already a leader. He ran Bespin. You know, he was part of the mining. You know, he wasn't part of the mining guild, but he had his own operation. He was the facilitator of that, place. So he was pretty much just content with being a businessman. Whereas Finn was trying to find his way. Lando already knew who he was. And he was a smuggler at first, and then he kind of moved his way up into the ranks and to a businessman, and then he started doing stuff. Of course, like he ran into the whole situation with Han and Leia on Bespin. Then he had to come, all right, you know what? I feel guilty. I got to rescue my friend, so I'm going to get him out of this, from rescuing him from Jabba's palace and Return of the Jedi. Then he's like, okay, well, now I'm actually going to lead the aerial assault, basically, on the second Death Star. And so that's kind of where he kind of really made his mark. Where you look at Finn, I mean, his journey is actually kind of considerable because that's the only person that we knew at one point who actually turned away from the Empire.
Well,
I mean,
yes and no.
Well, yes and no. I mean, I know. But, I mean, like in movie form, like no one's ever really seen that.
Well, there's Vader.
Well,
I know.
That's a more of a redemption thing.
No, I mean, actually, that was one of the things that I thought was cool about the Finn story was, first of all, we never really followed the story of a stormtrooper before.
Right.
You can maybe make the argument that with the clones and the Clone Wars that we did, because you had Rex, you had Cody, you had all these guys, and now we get to know them as people in a way, but as far as just regular run-of-the-mill stormtroopers, we never really... They were just these faceless minions, basically, doing the will of the Emperor.
Yeah.
Or Vader.
Yeah, and the thing about Finn was that, like, okay, he was trying to get away, and really Finn kind of set a lot of things in motion because, Finn was actually, he actually rescued Poe. He actually found Rey, brought Rey and helped find Han Solo, which brought them all back to the Resistance. I mean, he's kind of like an integral part. Like, most of that stuff wouldn't have happened without Finn. Now, granted, whether that was intentional, some things may have been, other things were not.
Well, but it was very much a Han Solo-like moment, though, because he was basically along with the ride because he had to be. When you really think about it, he was trying to escape, and then Poe helped him escape. No, they kind of helped each other.
Yeah,
really.
They kind of helped each other on that one.
Okay, so they get out of a sticky situation. It's like, well, we need each other right now.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't really... I mean, to me, that was one of my complaints, was they became sort of fast friends. Like, oh, Poe, you're cool. FN2... Finn, I'm going to call you Finn.
Yeah.
You're my buddy now. And I mean, it just... I don't know. It just seemed a little bit... Yeah.
Yeah.
Like they were rushing things a little bit, like, okay, man, this is a little after-school special kind of thing here. But I was able to let that go. Then he crash lands, and he's trying to run. He meets up with Rey.
Mm-hmm.
They get into it, and then immediately the First Order finds him, so now they're running.
Mm-hmm.
And much like Finn and Poe, Finn and Rey actually needed each other. They needed to escape.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't based on any kind of a mutual goal that they had,
right,
or some sort of a cause they were both fighting for. It was like, no, we need to get out of here, and we can help each other do that.
Right. I'm just saying that the impact of, like, had Finn not decided to leave, none of these things would have happened.
Well,
I mean, it's kind of like, it's one of those things. It's like a serendipity type thing. But
and yeah, I can see where you're going with that, because Rey would have had no reason to.
Like, Poe wouldn't have never been able to get out. He probably would have died or something like that at the hands of Kylo. And then Rey would have never linked up with him, and they would have never gotten on the Falcon, and then they would have never found,
Not to go back to
like
a lot of our
thing,
little,
like...
but here's a little bit of our philosophical debates, though. I mean, I don't want to go there, but I have to. We have already talked about 1,000,000 times that the Force will manipulate things,
right,
in order to do its will, right?
True.
So obviously that was happening. If Finn just decided, you know what, I'm not doing it, I'm going to stay a stormtrooper or whatever, The Force would have found another way to make it happen.
True.
So you can't really say. I mean, I understand what you're saying, that based on the events of the film.
Right.
But, I mean, we all know, as Star Wars fans, as heavier Star Wars fans, maybe the casual fan wouldn't think about this, but, yeah, I mean,
yeah, that's true.
The Force is going to do it, and it's one of those things that I think that
they
part...
picked him because they knew it would affect him, so...
And it's kind of like he needed to learn the same lesson. That, Han Solo needed to learn, and that Lando needed to learn. Although Lando, I think Lando accepted it because he had that one thing he had that guilt thing going.
Yeah, I mean, but see, that's because he's responsible for people.
Yeah. I
think that's the one, because that's when, when they landed, Han was like, oh, man, listen to you. You sound all responsible, and, it's like, well, yeah, I've been kind of...
and it's funny.
Just like he had to grow up.
Well, and when you see Solo... You totally get that.
Exactly.
Like when you look at where Lando was during the events of Solo and his attitude and everything, and then you look at him and he's talking about bureaucratic stuff and paperwork.
Yep.
And, all these contracts or whatever. It's kind of like, I mean,
he's under some CD bar trying to cheat people out of poker games.
Right. And I'm sure Solo was like, you can really see now why he would be so shocked at this. Like, whoa, what happened to you?
Exactly.
And then you almost have to think like maybe he's taking another look. But of course, by that point, and that was a pivotal point for Solo as well, because remember, he was trying to go back to Jabba to pay him back.
Yeah.
That's why I think it was so sad when Boba Fett caught up with him, because he was literally trying to get the money back to him.
Yeah, that's why he left. He's like, I got a bounty on my head.
He's got a bounty on his head. It's like, okay, look, I'll catch up with you guys later, but I got to pay this thing off.
Yeah, I got to pay the bill. And
he had more than enough money. It almost makes me wonder what would have happened if he could have just been like, look, I mean, it does amaze me. And again, I know I'm probably reading too much into this, but hey, welcome to Star Wars fandom. It almost seems to me like in the time, he could have found a way to get word to Jabba that, hey, I'm coming to pay you back.
Well, he's probably heard that before. He's a smuggler. So the thing is that...
No, if he had said, get me safe passage. So, like, they're running from the Empire. But if he told Jabba, and Jabba's very powerful, he could have done this. If he said, listen, I have the money, I'm coming to pay you, but the Empire is, like, on my tail, but I have the money, guarantee me safe passage to Tatooine, and I will pay you back.
That could have worked. I just think that... I don't think the Empire would have gone along with it because they had a greater need for them. And the Empire is infinitely more powerful than Jabba.
Well, but the thing is, the Empire would never have known about it. It's not like Jabba's going to go to the Empire and let them know. I mean, he could have somehow smuggled them or smuggled him.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, if you look at the events, though, by the way, as a brief sidebar. So... This weekend, for those who live in Michigan, if you do want to check out Empire Strikes Back, they are showing it at the Imagine Novi Drive-In.
Wait, no way.
Yeah.
Are they actually doing it? Because I had heard it was
Superman movie.
I thought it was only the Empire. Oh, boy. Oh, it's very rare that you get to see somebody have a nervous breakdown on YouTube, but there is a first time for everything.
Right.
What I meant to say was, I thought that was only a UK thing.
No.
I did not know, because they didn't seem to have any U.S. dates on that at all. So they are releasing it here.
Yeah, so the Imagine Novi, in their drive-in, they're actually showing the first Superman movie.
Wait, they have a drive-in?
Well, yeah, since they can't do indoors, they created like a screen.
Well, it's not a real drive-in.
Not
it's
a real
more
drive-in.
Like they improvise something.
Yeah, it's a parking lot thing, and you just pull up and, But...
well, I mean, if they're doing it in Michigan, they're probably doing it in other areas too. Then,
yeah. So I mean, if you live in other places,
in
check
the
it
U.S.
out. Yeah, at least.
Hey, we do have people watching us outside of the U.S. Quite a bit, actually.
Speaking of which, Ronaldo's here. Ronaldo says,
"Oh, that was a segue." I think you were leading me in the will of the force. Okay, all right, I get it.
It's like a quarterback, lead the receiver where you need him to go.
Just sip my non-tea here.
I think Lando, he was the key to destroy the second Death Star, and if he didn't, He brought reinforcements, and he brought reinforcements in the Rise of Skywalker. The Resistance would have been destroyed. That is a valid point.
Oh, I mean, that's two very valid points.
Yeah, very good. Good
that
one,
we've been
Ronaldo.
talking about this for like 10 minutes, and that never even. We're sitting there like microscopic analysis over here, and we didn't even think of that stuff. Yeah, those are some pretty good points. Yep, key to blowing up the second Death Star and bringing in the reinforcements of the Rise of Skywalker.
That is true.
And he also was the one that was responsible for bailing him out when they were on. Oh man, this is getting to be stupid.
You talking about Tatooine?
No, what planet were
Endor?
they on? No, Rise of Skywalker.
Oh, Rise of Skywalker.
When they went to the sand planet with that celebration and all that.
Oh yeah, I can't even pronounce.
Totally blanked out. Now, you guys remember, let us know in the chat section. I seem to be having some very serious memory issues.
Well, you do have a birthday coming up.
Well,
so.
yeah. I think Captain Antilles had my memory wiped. But yeah, I mean, that was big too because they were actually, the First Order was on their way to find them, and Lando bailed them out and brought them into his little sand palace or whatever, that little vehicle.
Yeah.
That pimped out sandcrawler looking thing.
Well, I mean, but you can say, though, that, like, Finn also was the one, he and Rose found the code breaker. Finn also actually picked up a lightsaber and went against Kylo. Let's see.
Daryl for the rebuttal.
Let's see. Oh, he led the charge on the Death Star. Well, not the Death Star, the Star Destroyer, I'm sorry. In Rise of Skywalker with the little horses and stuff.
Well, and for that matter, he also led the charge on Starkiller Base, too, with Han. He got him in there. Of course, he lied about everything, but...
Yeah. Got Phasma into the trash compactor. He went head up against Phasma.
And then killed her.
Let's see.
He actually was, well, he didn't actually do it, but he was willing to sacrifice himself.
Yes.
On Crate.
Yep.
I mean, don't get me wrong. Finn, he's a really good character. In fact, it's because he's a good character, which is the whole reason why I'm upset that they underused him. They totally underused him.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
I agree. I definitely agree. I think
they kind of relegated him to sort of a secondary character, and it's like you actually have some really good storytelling and stuff we've never seen in Star Wars, and you sacrifice that to give us more things that we've seen in Star Wars. Or to give us, like, really stupid stories, like, oh, every Star Destroyer now has a Death Star cannon on it.
Well, okay. So, based upon the evidence, you still going with Lando?
Yeah. I'm
Okay.
still going with Lando because, Lando was one of the architects. If it weren't for him, Finn would have nothing to rescue. I mean, if nothing else, and I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying because if you look at their respective time periods, and I might say there'd be more of an argument there if Lando wasn't in Finn's time period still doing stuff.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm still going to go, and I agree with you. I do agree that it's Lando.
It's got to be Lando.
Yeah, it's got to be Lando. But I did want to make a case for Finn.
No, and I mean, again, I don't think that anybody, when we put the, first of all, you're the one that pitted these guys against each other.
Yes,
I mean,
I did.
nobody in the, community, I guess, were out there going, you know what, I think, but I'm sure that people have debated this before.
Mm-hmm.
The whole typical water cooler conversations, or, man, I can't talk today. All kinds of stuff. People have probably debated things like this. But I do believe that you can make a strong case for Finn, and you can make a case, too, that he was underutilized because he actually had a lot he could do. He was not just a side character.
Well, that was the thing. How this came about was because, everybody was making the comparisons of Rey being the Luke Skywalker of this particular saga, Poe being the Han Solo of this particular saga, and then they compared Finn to Lando.
Well, if you remember, when we were talking about, I don't remember exactly the circumstances, but we were talking about them making the Zahn trilogy, and I said that
oh yeah, you could use the same.
You could use the same storyline. You could plug in the new characters to replace the old characters and do the same storyline.
Right.
You could do that. And you could actually plug in Finn for Lando.
I agree.
You know, we'll have to see. But what about you guys? Do you guys think that Finn edges out Lando because of a lot of the things that he's done, or do you think, you know, the right answer that Lando was the guy? You know, let us know. Let us know in the comments section if you're watching the rebroadcast, or let us know right now as we're chatting live. All right. You ready to move over to the cantina?
Let's go to the canteen. Let's grab
All
that
right,
drink.
let's do it. All right, so now we begin some more Mandalorian stuff.
Yeah,
It's just Mandalorian all over the place. And I have to say, being a fan, I'm totally fine with that.
Well, Mandalorian seems to also have some literature coming out pretty soon. There are some talks of the Mandalorian books. These books are expected to arrive sometime between the fall of 2020 and spring of 2021. We don't have any specific dates for it, but the fact that the art of the Mandalorian season 1 and the cover art is coming out. So they actually have like a book just based upon season 1 as far as all the artwork, all the different
yeah, I mean, if I remember correctly,
like
yeah, one was basically based on the production itself and just a lot of the different art, and almost like an encyclopedia of the show. And then the next one is supposed to be an original novel.
Yeah, there's supposed to be at least 6 books based on the series.
Okay.
So that
was the thing I didn't know was how
now.
many. I knew there was going to be a bunch, and I also know that it's been pushed back. Like, it was supposed to be out. Man, I don't remember when the original date they were supposed to have it, but I think it's been pushed back to next summer, hasn't it?
Well, that's what they said. There's some that'll still be released fall of this year.
Oh, okay.
Excuse me, and then also spring of 2021. So they have 6 books announced, including 2 novelizations of the TV series, one for adults, and then another for the junior readers. There's also another pair of books seemingly aimed at younger readers. So, and then they also have like the visual guide that we talked about.
No, I'm totally looking forward to this.
Yeah, and that was kind of created by Lucasfilm exec Pablo Hidalgo. So he was kind of the mastermind behind that. So, you know, with the Mandalorian being such a hit, yeah, I think the books and the comics are really going to be interesting because now you can even tell even more stories.
That's the thing. I've been waiting for some stuff to get into, and it's not even so much just the Mandalorian characters. It's the time period. It's the fact that we don't have a whole lot that takes place immediately after Return of the Jedi.
And for how long, you know, so you have like 30 years between.
Yeah, well, that's the other thing. Exactly, between that and The Force Awakens. So it's like we don't have a whole lot of stories. But again, as it gets a little closer to The Force Awakens, it shifts a little bit more toward the sequel trilogy characters and stuff like that. What I like to see is the immediate aftermath of the fall of the Empire. Because that, to me, could just produce all kinds of different stories, all kinds of different original characters. I mean, there's just so much that you can do. And it's not just about, oh, what is Luke Skywalker doing? Or, you know, I wonder what Han Solo's doing. You could do that. You can have books that explore that in new canon now. But I would like to see what everybody's doing. And particularly, it's nice that they can actually expand the Mandalorian lore. You know, they can actually get into some things like the Bounty Hunter Guild that they had.
Yeah, that would really be cool.
You know, or just, I mean, anything really. Just, I think I would totally eat up anything that they had to say or had to tell about this particular time period, because I think it's a really underutilized time period.
Well, especially when, you know, you got Bo-Katan, you know, still around. You still
sure,
got,
I mean, that's the other thing, too. I mean, exactly. You still have people from Clone Wars or Rebels that are still around during this time period. And, you know, I mean, there's been so much that has been built up as far as all these characters, just this rich tapestry that you have of characters, of worlds, of, you know, different stories and everything that you could actually you could tell so much.
Well, yeah, I mean, you can go into his training. You have so many things that you could have, because we see the Mandalorian as an adult, but we still we've gotten flashbacks of when he was a child, but there's still
Right.
that stuff that we haven't.
Sure.
So you can have a whole series or a book that's just dedicated to when he was actually found in that little, I guess, little hiding place, I guess you'd best way to call it. So from there to like, okay, how did he, the training as far as the Mandalorian, as far as not taking off your helmet and everything like that, because that's different from
Yeah, now see
the
that's
Mandalorians that we came to know when we saw
even in Rebels.
because they were taking their helmets off all the time. So
Sure.
now
Half the time they didn't even wear them. They only wore them when they went into battle a lot of
exactly.
times.
So now why is it that you can't take your helmet? So you can find out about that whole rule. I mean, yeah, there's a lot that you can explore.
Just so much stuff. And I think that The Mandalorian is, because it's popular enough, I also think it could actually be a gateway to get casual fans to come into the whole Star Wars world.
And yeah, especially people who aren't into the whole Force Jedi type situation. Like if you don't
Right.
care for that type of stuff, well, this is like we've always said, this is a faction that's more real, more tangible for people to kind of consume.
It's kind of like they say, there's two factions of Star Wars fan. There's ones that like the war, and then there's ones that like the lore.
Yep.
And that's pretty much it. Is that well, I'm a lore guy basically. I love the Jedi, the Sith, all that. But I've never really favored. I mean, I think I favor that more so, but it's
Sure.
not like that's the only thing I'm interested in.
Well, the war part is cool too because what really kind of showcased that was Rogue One.
Yes.
Like once people saw Rogue One, everybody's like, "Yo, like okay, now this I can."
It's a good point because that was actually the first Star Wars movie that had no Jedi or Sith. I mean, sure they had some Force,
Yeah, Vader was in it, of course. But.
Yeah, I mean, you had the basically the Wills, the Guardians of the Wills, Chirrut Emery and Emily
Baze.
and Baze, yeah. So you basically had these guys, and they were sort of like Jedi acolytes in a way. I mean, they're kind of like students or disciples of the Jedi or whatever, but they weren't actual full-blown Jedi.
Yeah.
And so this is the first time you ever had a movie that didn't feature any of that. And
Yeah.
I almost said, that's right, it's the Vader scene.
Yeah.
They almost got away without igniting a lightsaber.
Mm-hmm.
But then you had that supremely cool scene. But see, again, that was something where it wasn't overly...
And it was done perfectly at the right moment, the right time.
Right time.
It made sense. And it gave you exactly what it needed to give you, was that surprise. Because I remember, honestly, when you and I went to go see it, some little kid, and this is why I hate, going after people who've seen movies.
No, I know.
Because they come out and they're just, of course, they're excited. They're just talking about it, but then you're hearing it. So I remember some kid said something about Vader. Like, oh, man, when Vader did it, I was just like, Vader did.
Stop.
And I was just like, what? I was kind of confused. And I was like, well, okay, I knew Vader was probably going to be in here. But then I was like, when that happened, I was like, oh, that's what he was talking about. Like,
Then you were all like that. Man, I can't believe that Vader. Well, I mean, the funniest thing still to me was, I think it was The Force Awakens, that one story that came out where that guy
got into a fight.
just beat this guy to a pulp because he happened to casually mention some spoiler after he saw the movie.
Yeah.
Star Wars fans can be hardcore, everybody.
Yeah, man.
So you would never see Star
That's
Trek
the war
fans
part.
doing that. Yeah.
Because
Exactly.
he messed up the lore.
That's it. But I mean, it's one of those things that I do just think that this is a good opportunity to tell stories that we haven't really gotten yet in the Star Wars universe.
Yeah, definitely.
And I mean, look, for all you guys out there that are on the fence about it, I mean, Daryl can even attest to it, even though it takes him like 3 years to get through a book. But
I'm a slow reader.
slow reader. But you got it. They're great, though, aren't they?
I like to take my time and really digest what I'm
Well,
reading.
wait a minute. Since we're doing this weekly checkup,
boy.
you knew it was coming. I mean, you knew we were going to do this.
I know.
All right. Where are you
I
in
just
Queen's
don't have
Peril?
it. I'm still
You read a couple of pages? Or
I even got a paragraph into this thing yet. Oh,
well,
man.
last we checked, you were 3/4 of the way through it.
Yeah, I'm still there.
All right.
Yeah. I've just been trying to deal with all the school stuff, man. Everybody's been asking me questions about that, so it's just, and of course you're getting called into all these different meetings, and it's been crazy.
Yeah. Well, I get it. I mean, it takes, there was, well, hey, I'm one to talk. It took me forever to read Solo.
Or Last Shot, yeah, the
Last
Last
Shot?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But let's see.
But I mean, here's what I would like to see. Besides the Mandalorian stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
I would actually like them to go into a little bit of what Luke is doing. Only because I think it relates.
Sure.
You know, I don't necessarily think that they have to, go too crazy with it. I would be happy if they just mention them. And this isn't one of those fanboy shoehorn, the person in kind of things. I mean...
Well, it would make sense because when you bring Ahsoka in there, now you have that instant connection with the Jedi. Now you can make that bridge.
That's why it makes sense to me. And that's the only reason. And again, they don't have to do like a whole series of books dedicated to Luke Skywalker or anything like that. Although eventually I think that they should.
Yeah, I think they'll eventually kind of go backwards.
Right. And you guys, I mean, again, if you've ever read any of these books, you know what I'm talking about. The new canon books are really good. They're really well written. They're really good. I cannot stress enough how much I would recommend you guys go out and read a few of them. And you don't have to read every single one of them. Although, again, I would practically recommend that you do it because it fills in so much. Mm-hmm. Like one thing that I would highly recommend is Catalyst.
Oh, yeah.
Because it changes the way you look at Rogue One. Master and Apprentice changes the way you look at the Phantom Menace.
Definitely.
So, start there. All right, well, what do we got next?
All right, so here's the next big question. So we're talking about Star Wars and, the films and whatnot. Mm-hmm. So now that Vader's been vanquished, the Emperor's been vanquished, so we think, he pops up like Jason Voorhees again.
Hey, man, anything could happen in the Star Wars universe.
So the big question is, do you think that Thrawn will be the next best villain for a film?
Yes.
Okay.
So next we...
Very Jack Nicholson of you.
You know what? I think that this is because, and I say this only because Thrawn plays a very pivotal role in a lot of things that happen, once again, I think, post-Return of the Jedi. He's another one.
Yeah, and he gives people a challenge, and it's a different type of challenge.
It's a different type of challenge. It was the same thing where I thought that he was the best villain for 7, 8, and 9, which the Timothy Zahn trilogy. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I remember when I was, eagerly awaiting for this thing to come out, because I remember when they announced it. They basically said, oh, yeah, there's going to be a book, and it's going to be essentially episode 7. So naturally, a lot of us thought, well, did Lucas actually write this thing, and now they're putting it in book form? Because he had said that he didn't really want to make any more movies. Mm-hmm. And it turned out that it was this highly respected author, wrote a lot of sci-fi stuff or whatever, and it was his own story. And Lucas actually went along with it and said, yeah, cool, go ahead and write it. Mm. And naturally, every one of us were like, well, Vader's gone, the Emperor's gone, or so we thought.
All right.
So who's going to be this bad guy? Who could possibly be better than Vader?
Or the Emperor at that point.
Or the Emperor. It's like, what can you do? Do you get like an even more powerful Sith Lord? And, it's kind of like, how would you do that?
Yeah.
And so then you find out the big bad guy in this is just like some Grand Admiral.
Some regular old military guy.
Not to take anything away, because if you read the book Tarkin, or you read any of the new canon novels that Tarkin is in, he's actually pretty cool. I like to see him going up against all these other guys and all the political stuff or whatever. It's actually really fascinating, and you come to really respect him.
Well, even I love that whole thing when Vader and Tarkin went at each other, and they kind of were like, all right, I have to be able to kind of find ways to beat Vader in the Force and all this type of stuff. And
exactly.
And the fact that Tarkin almost did it. That's what I'm saying. It's like,
yeah. So
if you're smart enough, and that's what I'm saying. That's what makes Thrawn.
That's my proof.
Yeah.
My proof is if you can actually see that there are ways that you can conceivably have this totally human, normal, military-like character be as cool if you present it right.
Yeah.
Now, Thrawn, of course, is a little bit of a step above because he's an actual alien.
Right.
And he comes from the unknown regions, which is something that, we had heard of. But And that's another whole thing that they can explore in.
Yeah, because there's stuff out there that we don't know he could use against people that we've never even heard of before.
Sure. And, you don't know what's out there.
Right.
And that's the idea, is that they set that up a little bit by saying, oh, the Emperor was... And actually, Exegol is in the unknown region. So you're getting a little bit of a feel for that. And I think that they're starting to try to warm people up and put the unknown regions more into people's consciousness. Like, even the casual fan kind of knows what that is because of the Rise of Skywalker. So I think that because of that, Thrawn makes sense because he's already a loved character among the fan base.
Yeah, I mean, even when we went to go see the marathon when Force Awakens was released, remember that guy that came in dressed like Thrawn?
Yeah.
And that's what I'm like, whoa, because I'm like, who's the guy dressed like Captain Crunch? All of a sudden, and I was like, oh wait, that's right, he's supposed to be Thrawn.
Yeah, so
but,
I mean,
and that's the thing, like in Grand Armor Thrawn, like you really get to see him in Rebels. How, if you need like a visual depiction of kind of like how he is, but of course the books even go further. But I mean, just how methodical he is, how calculating he is. He's always kind of playing. I always say he's a chess playing chess. But that's essentially
he's essentially the Sherlock Holmes of the Star Wars universe.
But just, on the evil side, I guess.
Yeah, and it basically even has... What's cool is Zahn gave him a new Watson. So
yeah,
it's Eli something in the new books, and then it was Captain Paleon in the old ones. Mm-hmm. And the thing is that Paleon has actually been brought into the new canon as well. Mm. But...
In those new books that were released?
No, it was like... the Aftermath trilogy, I think, is where he first popped up. But I think he's actually in a few other ones, too. Just like Ray Sloan. Yep. Ray Sloan's another one. She's basically somebody that was a captain and rose up all the way through the ranks of... Well, I think she's a Grand Admiral, too. But there's a lot of different things that they could do where you can have these people be as compelling as a Vader, as an Emperor, or as any of the other Sith Lords, because, like I said before, everybody already knows who Thrawn is. He's already loved. Mm-hmm. He already has a somewhat established backstory. It really wouldn't, and you pointed out that he's in Rebels, so it really wouldn't be hard for the casual fan to get up to speed with this guy.
Right. Even Ronaldo said, he says, "I love Thrawn. But I would rather see him in a spin-off movie or a TV show than a saga movie."
Well, I think we could safely say the saga movies are done.
Yeah.
I mean, any movie that's coming out now, you got to remember, none of them are saga films.
Well, when you say saga, I think he's referring to like a trilogy type of situation.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
So, yeah, kind of like a standalone, like a Rogue One or a Solo.
Well, no, like a...
No, I mean, that's what he wants.
Oh, yeah, right, yeah. Oh,
instead of a trilogy of films or something.
Well, yeah.
Right?
Yep. That's exactly what he's saying.
Yeah. And I agree. And again, I think that one of the things that we have to look at here is that Disney Plus is going to be the home for a lot of these stories that... So Disney is probably only going to release films that they feel are bankable, big-budget, blockbuster type, saga-like. I won't say they're saga films because they really aren't.
Well, and that's the thing. I think...
Unless they do make episode 10. I mean, there have been those rumors where they're like, hey,
well, especially if George comes back. I mean, who knows? He might try to right-size this thing.
Well, and that's another thing, too. It's like we don't even know who's going to be running Lucasfilm. And now they had made that announcement that I know we covered on this show before, but where they pushed all the movies ahead a year, so now it's like 2023. And
yeah. Well, see, the thing is, well, to Ronaldo's point, I think I agree with him except for the spinoff movie. I would rather see a TV show series, or I would rather see a trilogy, because I think Thrawn is one of those guys you got to give him a trilogy because he's just so vast, and I think that to really get into him and to really understand how...
Well, it depends on how you look at things. Depends on how you look at it, because to Ronaldo's point, and again, Ronaldo, you can correct me if I'm wrong here.
He will.
That is one thing I don't have to worry about. He will. But a spinoff movie doesn't necessarily have to be a single film. You can have a spinoff movie that has Thrawn in it. Then you have another movie that maybe has somebody else, and then you come back. It's almost like a lot of the novels. It's true you do have the Thrawn trilogy. And in fact, there's only one example and it's in the expanded universe where they only had a 2-book series that featured Thrawn.
But see, I think
I think it was called The Hand of Thrawn or something like that.
I think if you did that, that might kind of
Well,
all that jumping around might kind of confuse people.
Well, I mean, it depends. It's like if it's well, I mean, this may not be the best example, but look at Lando. Now, granted, I know he was part of a bigger story, but he only appeared in certain films. He appeared when he needed to be, and then he wasn't in the films where the story didn't call for his character. And you could do that with Thrawn. If you're telling...
Not if he's the main guy, though. If he's the main villain, you can't. Like, Lando's, for all intents and purposes, a secondary character.
Right, but I mean, it depends on how you're making him the main villain, though.
Well, I mean, if you're making the main villain, he's the main guy. Like, he's, like...
Well, okay, look at the Clone Wars series.
I mean, the only way I could see if you said, like, Palpatine, because Palpatine technically wasn't
either Palpatine or you can even go Dooku. Now, he was featured a lot in the Clone Wars series, but he wasn't in every single episode.
Well, I'm just saying, like, if you're going about films, like, okay, Dooku wasn't in The Phantom Menace, but you couldn't because it's only violates the rule of 2. But from Attack of the Clones to Revenge of the Sith, he was in.
But even look at Rebels. Thrawn wasn't in every episode of Rebels. He was in there when he needed to be.
True, but that's because it's a TV show. So you're bound. That's made to bounce around. But I'm talking, if you're talking about a trilogy of films, or if you're talking about a bunch of films, it's like, okay, well, you're jumping around in films now.
Okay, how do I put this? So let's just say that you make a film, it takes place on Tatooine, and you have some character, Jabba. All right, Jabba is a good example for this. I'm thinking you could use Thrawn like a Jabba the Hutt, where you can have him be the main bad guy when the action takes place where Jabba would be. But then if you make another movie, it's completely independent. It's almost like, again, it's a TV reference.
I see what you're saying.
But you could do this in film too. It's like, or good example, Jaws and James Bond. He was brought in as a main villain when the story called for Jaws being the main villain. But then there were other movies that happened in between those where he wasn't the main villain. You know, it's kind of like you can use him when you needed him if you wanted to do a series of standalone films. Because they're not always going to make the same film anyway. You might have something where you have the remnants of the Empire, which is where you would put Thrawn. You might have another standalone film that deals with the Jedi and the Sith. Then maybe, a couple of years later, you come back. It sounds like that what you're saying, though, is probably going to be what it is that it's probably going to be a situation where you're going to get trilogies or, maybe it's 2 movies or something.
Yeah.
Where there's going to be a story that it's like, okay, we have this schedule. It's not going to be an episode of the week as a film.
For somebody, and that's what I'm saying, for somebody like Thrawn, who's beloved and he's a big part of the Star Wars fandom, I think that you would have to give him almost a trilogy just so people who may be casual fans could really learn to appreciate Thrawn the way that we do. Because
I agree anyway. I mean, think about it. You're not going to put Thrawn out there and just give him a single. If you're going to put Thrawn out there, you're giving him more than one movie.
You should, because it's like, okay, well then now you got like, who are you going to go with next after that?
Unless, of course, you do a TV series.
And that's what I'm saying. Like, that's why I agree. I say either a TV series where you can bounce around like that, and that because to that point, like you did with Rebels, that's valid. And TV series are kind of made to kind of not be linear. Because
you're basically telling a single story over a long period of time, like a season. Now, of course, in today, I mean, a season could be 8 or 10 episodes, but it's still a collection of stories.
Right. Now, Ronaldo says, I agree. Thrawn can be used as a villain in more than one movie. I would like to see him like the guy pulling the strings behind the scenes. Yeah.
Okay, well, that's where your point on the Emperor. If you treated him like the Emperor, see, that's another thing that you got to look at too. When you say the main villain of a film,
that's when you said
which one?
Like the Bond reference, like when you made like Jaws. It's like, well, Jaws is really he wasn't the main villain. He was more the main assassin. But like Blofeld would be like the main villain.
Well, yeah, because I mean, with Jaws, it was Drax was Moonraker and Jaws was working for Drax. And,
right.
Then you had oh man, forgot the main guy in The Spy Who Loved Me, but it was like that guy with the underwater thing or whatever.
Yeah, or Thunderballers. So you got all these different
Sure,
got the main
like,
guy.
Jaws is more like Odd Job or something
Exactly.
like that. I mean, I get that, but I'm just saying though that Thrawn, because remember, Thrawn could be like that too. He's a Grand Admiral. He's not. You could have somebody higher up than him.
Well, yeah, I mean, but I'm guessing if there's no Palpatine in there and there's no Vader, who else is running?
Well, it could be like a Kylo and Snoke thing. I mean, you could say that those guys are the ones that actually filled the vacuum of Vader and the Emperor.
True. But...
you don't necessarily have to have... Granted, they were introduced at the same time. I mean, I get it. Thrawn's a well-known... It's almost like you got to make him the main guy, but don't forget, in the novels... I'm not talking about in the Zahn novels, because that's true. He was the main guy, and Paleon was kind of like his second in command.
Mm-hmm.
But in the Thrawn trilogy, I mean, again, this is happening during the original, basically the saga. So, but he wasn't necessarily like the main guy. It was just you were following his story, though.
Mm-hmm.
So you were seeing things, but you had Governor Price. You had, obviously, Tarkin. You had Krennic in a few of them. You had all these guys that you were following that too. It's just that Thrawn played a part in that. So you could treat it like that. But I'd have to be inclined to agree with you, though, that if they're going to introduce him in a film,
mm-hmm.
or I should say if they're going to put him in a film, he's probably going to be the main, because he'd be the marquee name.
Exactly.
Because anybody else that you would introduce...
who? Exactly.
I mean, unless you brought in... like Darth Bane or, somebody like that.
Plagueis or something crazy.
Yeah, exactly. Like if you did something like that, or maybe you bring in, well, no, she's not really, like if you brought in Dr. Aphra.
Oh, yeah.
But then again, then they would be sharing the billing, though. It's,
mm-hmm.
and Thrawn he's been around longer.
Yep.
So, yeah, you're probably right. I mean, it would probably be something along those lines. And in my opinion, I don't necessarily think that you could get anybody else at this point. Like, who else would you...
That's what I'm saying. Like,
you could create somebody, and this is where it's a little frustrating to me that nobody is being forthright at Lucasfilm. I kind of miss the days when they used to say, okay, here's our next batch of films. Because the last time that this happened, we got confirmation about Rogue One. We got confirmation about Solo. They said, okay, here's the movies that we're making. Oh, and here's a few that we're looking at. But we're not sure if we're going to put them in production. But the point is they would announce their calendar a few years out
mm-hmm.
and let you know what to expect. Now, that doesn't mean they're giving you any information about them. Half the time they weren't. They weren't telling you about who these people were or who was directing, who was going to star in it.
Mm-hmm.
None of that. But they would at least say, here's the movies we're looking at. Sometimes they wouldn't even tell you what they greenlit. They would just say, okay, we're looking at a Boba Fett. We're looking at an Obi-Wan. We're looking at all these things. We're not officially announcing them, but this is kind of where we're going. Right now, we don't have anything.
Bad Batch, that's it.
Yeah, well, okay, but again, that's TV. I'm not talking about TV.
Yeah, no,
See, that's the one area where they've actually been pretty good about it. I mean, they're letting us know constantly what they're doing in television. Like I said at the beginning of the show, I mean, they're constantly giving us a bunch of news.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as the films, all we know is that they're going to be releasing 3 of them.
Well, I mean, it's probably a good thing because just because of the way the films have been going lately. I mean, they probably want to give it a chance to...
But my point is, if they know... Look, they know that initially it was 2022. They only recently made the announcement that it was going to be moved to 2023, which means in the last 4 months, they were still looking at a 2022 timeline.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what is it?
Well, I think that's the thing. I think you have so many different things going on over at Lucasfilm, with the possibility, the rumors of George coming back. Because if he comes back, then that whole thing could change.
Well, and it makes me wonder how strong that is, though. Again, I don't...
Kathleen Kennedy she's pretty much leaving to go to I mean, iRobot. Bad Robot. So, I mean, that's pretty much almost inked. So that void is going to be filled. Now, whether that's going to be Feige, whether that's going to be Filoni, whether
But
that's
if
going to
that's
be
the
Favreau,
case, then they wouldn't have announced anything. Well, let's see what the next head wants. See, if you're going to release a movie in 2022.
But that happened before these talks happened, though.
But okay, let's just, because I know there's the production thing with COVID too.
Mm-hmm.
So now they say 2023. I don't remember if it's May or December.
Probably December. I'm gonna go with.
Let's say that because that's the furthest out.
Mm-hmm.
That's like 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
They have so much they have to do. It takes a while still to make these films.
Mm-hmm.
They have to be in some form of production right now. At the very least, pre-production. They have to be.
Mm-hmm.
So they know what the movie is. So just tell us what it is. You don't have to tell us anything about it. We don't even know who they're going with. You brought it up. They got Kevin Feige. They got Timothy Zahn. They got Ryan Johnson out there.
Yep.
Taika
Waititi.
Yeah, he was another one. Taika Waititi, who was actually. I know you always mess his name up. You know, they have all these people that they sort of announced, and then nothing, and we don't even know which person's movie it's going to be. So those are the kinds of things that are really bad business. This is why the films keep getting so messed up. Is because once again, you know, they're screwing with the fans, basically.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, oh yeah, here guys, get excited about this production schedule that we're doing. Well, okay, what are you doing? Oh, we're not telling you. There's a movie coming out in 2023. Okay. Yay! I can't wait for 2023's movie. I mean, yes. Tell me what it is.
The Phantom Menace 2.
And tell me what time period it's in. You know what I mean? It's like they're not giving us anything.
Yeah.
So to bring that into this particular conversation, which is really what this is all about, yes, it makes sense that Thrawn would be the guy, but it's really hard to even say. Will the next movie villain be Thrawn? It kind of depends on what the movie's going to be. If it's an Old Republic movie, obviously not.
Right.
You know, I mean, it makes sense to be Thrawn if it's a, say, let's go Rebels. Because that's the first time we actually see him.
Mm-hmm.
He was around before then because, you know, the Emperor and all that was... I think it was actually around the time period of Rebels that the new Thrawn trilogy takes place. Well, actually, no, because they flash back to the Clone Wars where Thrawn was actually working with Anakin, and then they had to rescue Padme and stuff. So he's been around a while, you know. So I mean, yeah, they could use him for anything that they were gonna. I would say if it's not Old Republic or High Republic, because that's another thing. They're introducing this whole new era to us. Are you gonna leave it at the books? Is it gonna be the movies?
I think they're going to have to do the movies with those.
Well, if you want it in everybody's consciousness, but then again, the Old Republic really hasn't been anything except a couple of video games, and everybody. I mean, granted, they've mentioned it in the movies though. Mm-hmm. They've never really mentioned the High Republic, so who knows?
Yep.
All right. Well, my rant is over. What do we got next?
Will we get answers for how Ahsoka survived the fight with Vader?
That's going to be.
That's got to be explained in Mandalorian.
Well, yeah, considering she's going to be in the movie.
That's what I'm saying. I'm like,
show,
yeah, Mandalorian, so you got to explain that one.
Yeah, I mean, I would think so. Well, okay, so you just finished the Clone Wars.
Mm-hmm.
Did you actually watch Rebels after that?
No.
Okay, so, because I'm trying to remember. I remember, you know, she hits him or whatever, cuts off part of his mask.
Mm-hmm. They
duel, and I remember it was an ambiguous ending.
Yeah.
But I don't remember, did she disappear? I forgot what happened. Because my memory, obviously, today doesn't work at all.
Well, at the end of Rebels, that episode, at least for Rebels, there was a moment where, of course, Ezra was trying to go back and help, and she force-pushed him out, and then the door closed, and then they were just, like, locked in that temple, that Sith temple, to do battle. So in the midst of that, after that was all said and done, you kind of hear this ominous music, and then Vader emerges out of there, wounded and whatnot, but you don't see Ahsoka. Like, it's not like he dragged her body out or anything.
That's right.
But
you didn't see what happened to her.
You never saw what happened to her, but then you saw, like, that little owl thing.
Yeah, that's because that was a theory that she became this force owl or something, or whatever that thing was.
But the funny thing is, that's the same thing we saw at the end of Clone Wars. When Vader came back, and he saw her lightsabers, buried in the snow. He ignites them, and then he looks up, and then he sees that same owl thing flying around him. So, and that's one of the things that I believe that there's more to the Force. And even because we even saw that even in the Clone Wars, how when Master Yoda was actually going on his whole little journey to find out how to actually become a Force ghost, you saw those other Force entities like changing into stuff.
Well, here's my question then. Given I didn't pay attention to anything you just said. No, I'm just kidding. Here's my question based on everything that you were talking about. Okay. Do you actually think, though, that they're going to start cramming a bunch of Force crap in The Mandalorian? I don't think so.
No. I think that's going to be reserved for whatever that show that we were talking about, that Ahsoka's getting her own live action.
You know what? I totally forgot about that show. I could buy that.
I think that's going to be the setup.
Well, I think my other thing would probably be something more along the lines of books, comics.
But I think you're going to have to explain, like, how does she, like, she might mention, like, yeah, I fought my old master, and, because, like, she might come out of nowhere and be like, well, where did you come from, and how did you do that, and, she might have to give some brief explanation on that. Like,
it'll be like that storytelling thing. All right, well, sit down. Let me tell you all about it. And it's like you get B-roll and all.
Or the Family Guy. It's kind of like that time when I did this. And
exactly. It's like that time I fought Vader and survived. I mean, who knows?
Ronaldo does have a thing. He says, kind of going back to the last conversation, didn't want to leave him out. He said, by the way, you did you see that Taika, got it right this time.
Hey, good job.
Already started the script. So maybe the next movie in 2023 will be his. It's a valid point.
Anything's possible.
Just hope it's not a remake of that Christmas special.
Oh, the Christmas special.
Yeah.
The holiday special. Life Day, which is canon now, by the way. It appeared in one of the books or comics or something. Mm-hmm. So I don't know how much of the holiday special they've canonized, but you could see it.
Yeah.
Hey, I mean, honestly, I'm just going to put this out here. Probably going to lose subscribers over this.
Another thumbs down.
Yeah, or, dislikes, which people seem to be giving us lately for some inexplicable reason. But I actually think that if they did the holiday special correctly with a budget, they could actually make a cool story. Only because the story itself isn't awful. It's weird.
It's the execution.
But yeah, I mean, and then especially when they had Princess Leia singing that Life Day song, that was like some sort of a bizarre Star Wars acid trip. Like, I remember even as a kid thinking that was weird, right? Because I was probably like 8 years old. It came out the year after Star Wars did, or A New Hope, I should say. But I remember watching that fairly recently, like within the last year. And I'm just going, this is, first of all, it's totally low budget. Mm-hmm. Secondly, it was just, then there was
random.
That really weird thing with, I think it was Harvey Korman or something, and he's sitting there watching Diane Carroll, I think it was, singing, and he's making all these weird, like, kind of sexual noises, and it looked like he was almost pleasuring himself in a way. I mean, it was
scrubbing the droid.
Yeah, it was like, why is this in here? Like, what is this? And then you had Princess Leia singing about Life Day, and it just, and that Carrie Fisher was totally hopped up on cocaine when she did it.
Had to be.
Had to be.
It's probably
In
her
fact,
idea.
everybody, I think, was hopped up on cocaine when they did that thing. But that said, I think that if you actually approached it a little bit more seriously, took out all the craziness, you might have a decent story, but I don't think it would be worth it. But that's the end, the thing there. Now, anybody, Ronaldo, or anybody say anything else?
No, I think that was it.
Okay, so with Ahsoka, though, I think with the Mandalorian, first of all, I'm really baffled as to why they're even bringing her into it. Honestly.
Yeah.
I was happy about it because I want to see a live-action Ahsoka, but I don't necessarily think that I want to see her in The Mandalorian.
Well, I think it makes sense just only because you introduced the Darksaber.
Yeah. Well, it would make sense to see Sabine.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily know if you have to see Ahsoka, but I can hang with that. And depending on where they go with it.
Well, I mean, you kind of have to look at it from the standpoint of, okay, with the Darksaber, who's going to,
Luke.
Exactly. But, I mean, you could.
See, this is why they opened that door that was stupid. Luke is now just fresh off.
That's true.
He is the Jedi. He's well known. He's the leader of the rebellion. He's probably looking for every artifact in the world. If he hears that, this Moff Gideon guy has the Darksaber, he's going to look into it.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think.
Unless they do something cheesy like Ahsoka goes, Luke asked me to look into this.
Probably. Or it
because
could,
Mark Hamill's too old to play Luke at this point.
Yep. Or it could just be a situation where, because of course, Ahsoka kind of went into hiding, and we never know where she ended up or where she went. So, if they ended up or in the fact that you have this Force-like being with Baby Yoda, what I'm saying? You can say, okay, maybe she sent something in the Force. She had to go figure it out. And she ran upon this situation, or maybe Gideon was in the process of terrorizing this one particular place, and he's got the Darksaber, and Ahsoka feels like, okay, well, I got to protect these people. And then she ends up,
I don't know, man. I just don't know if you can really make a convincing argument of why would Ahsoka be there and not Luke.
Well, I mean, Luke is, he can't be everywhere.
No, but I mean, this is a kind of a big deal. Unless it depends on, because even though we have seen Tatooine, we're still really not sure where in the galaxy all this stuff is taking place. I'm sure it's somewhere. There's something that actually says that.
Well, it's taking place everywhere. And at this point, like you brought up, Luke is looking for different artifacts, but he's probably, out looking at on different planets, looking for temples and all this other stuff.
Well, and at this point, and this is another reason why I really wish that they would come out with something that does definitively talk about where Luke is at this point. Because, sure, he could actually be trying to get students, but it seems like it's a little too early for that, because it seems like it has to be more close to The Force Awakens before we actually see students. It seemed like when Kylo and all those guys were in it, that was more like, it didn't seem like it was going on that long.
Well, you got to look at it from the standpoint of Luke is probably, he's trying to get, because it's what is he really going to do now? Okay, the Emperor's gone, Vader's gone. Now what? I mean, where does it Luke? What else is there for Luke to do? So at this point, he's probably got to go try to find all these different artifacts so he can get stronger in the Force. Yoda's gone, Obi-Wan's gone.
That's a
so
good point.
That's what I'm saying. He's got to strengthen himself so he can then start this order all over again, just to kind of make sure. So he's all over the place. The galaxy is a big place, so
basically, online tutorials. Okay,
right.
I don't have the teachers anymore, so I got to go find all these basically books on tape. Yeah, learning virtual.
Exactly.
Well, okay. I mean, I can buy that. I can buy that. I'll go along with that, because but I still think, in spite of what you're saying, I love you and all,
this should be Duel of Fates.
But well,
make this for next week.
The thing is, I would like an official from Lucasfilm to say all this. I would really like to see, story-wise, especially if you're going to start bringing in all these Force users and you're bringing in some of the lore into this time period, you really have to talk about where Luke is. Now, of course, if somebody from Lucasfilm were seeing this, that would be nice. But if somebody from Lucasfilm were watching this, they might say something like, dude, take it down a notch. It's coming in episode 4.
Right.
Because we don't know what's in it.
Yeah,
we don't really know, and this kind of goes back to our original discussion about the old trailer in the first place.
Well, and that could be like a big surprise. Like maybe they found somebody to play, like a young Luke or something to pop up, or we don't know.
They could, or they might be able to DH Mark Hamill enough. It just depends. It's true. There's a lot of things they can do. I mean, we know Ahsoka's in it. Maybe Luke is in it.
Mm-hmm.
But then I would almost be a little disappointed because once again, you have proven, you can actually do the whole Spielberg. My friend here says it's fine.
You have to prove that you have a good show without
Yeah,
Jedi.
you don't. Well, not just without Jedi, but without a million of the original trilogy characters propping you up.
Mm-hmm.
You do have some mentions of stuff. Like they'll talk about people. But for the most part, there's nothing really. It's all new.
Mm-hmm.
And it's new worlds. That's the other thing I think is so cool about it. I mean, yeah, we visited Tatooine or whatever, but I mean, there's nothing in it that's really familiar, but yet it feels like Star Wars. It's very much the perfect example of what Star Wars should be, and I would hate to see that ruined by them, okay, let's dig out and dust off all the original trilogy guys. You don't need to prop this show up. It's been nominated for like 15 Emmys. It's good.
Yeah. I mean, I think, but see, that's what I think. If they handle things like they did Rogue One, where you use Vader sparingly. I think if you use these characters to move this, because I mean, it makes sense. Like you said, Boba Fett getting out of the Sarlacc pit. Okay, that makes sense. If you got, this new species of Yoda or whatever. Okay, you got that to contend with. That's something new. But then, okay. Now you brought the Force into the situation now. And then now you bring the Darksaber into the situation. So now, I mean, you almost have to address okay, well, who's going to address these issues now?
Well,
with people who don't have the Force.
Well, and it's basically one of the criticisms that I don't like about Star Wars is when people go, well, why do they always have to bring the Force into it? It's because the Force is kind of everywhere.
Well, the Force is the essential part of Star Wars.
Yeah, it's kind of the thing behind Star Wars, really. I mean, everybody.
That's like saying why have Star Trek without spaceships or something like that.
Yeah, or without the Prime Directive or something. You know, it's kind of like it drives everything that everybody does, and that's the thing. The Force is essentially this omnipotent force. Then it's kind of like using something to describe something, but I mean, it's basically a part. It's part of life. It binds them and all this stuff, and there's some people that are in tune with it. There's some that aren't. Mm-hmm. Some choose to ignore it. Some choose not to believe it, but it's there. Mm-hmm. And obviously, there's all these people that have. I mean, you're not going to just suddenly, unless you're just focusing on the Empire. But even then, you're going to have it come into play.
And then you really think about it. I mean, it's almost like a new thing because if you really take into consideration the Mandalorian, the time in which it takes place, this is post Return of the Jedi.
That's the big thing for me.
So the thing is that to most people, even in the New Hope, they thought that was an ancient religion then.
That's true. Yeah.
So it was okay, so the only people you have that were Force users that, okay, no one knew Obi-Wan Kenobi existed. No one knew where Yoda was. No one even saw the Emperor. And then the only person you had walking around was Vader.
Yeah, Vader really was the only
person. And then, of course, when Luke pops up, so then now they're like, oh, Jedi Master. It's like, well, the heck have you been? We thought you guys were extinct 30 years ago.
Well, and that's
so that's what I'm saying.
But again, it goes into my problem with, okay, if you get Ahsoka and you get any of these other people, it's kind of like, well, great. Now you're going to have all these Jedi popping up all of a sudden. It's like, where were you back then?
Well, I mean, it makes sense, though, because remember, they all went into hiding, those who survived, and they were trying not to get caught.
Right, and the Empire falls, so it's like, oh, we can come out now. I mean, I get that. I mean, and it does make sense. But at the same time, it's like, I just think so. I don't mind like little bits. Like I actually didn't mind. In fact, I was very excited that Gideon had the dark saber.
Mm-hmm.
Why can't he just have the dark saber? Because he conquered somebody, and you know what I mean. It's like doesn't have to have this whole.
And he might not. I mean, but it's just the fact that what's more actually more than the dark saber is the presence of Baby Yoda. That changed everything. Because now you have Baby Yoda. It'll be different if, like, okay, it was just a baby. But then you have the thing lifting up this whole animal. He's choking Gina Carano's character. Like, and then now you got, he's using all these Force stuff to the point where, Grief Kargas is like, yeah, do the magic hand thing, which is like the funniest thing in the world to me.
That is like the funniest. So,
I mean, like the sheer fact that you have Baby Yoda out here using the Force, and the whole reason why everybody was kind of, the Mandalorian, the whole series was him protecting the stupid baby because they kept trying to experiment on it. Because somebody in this fallen empire found out about this thing and was like, okay, we want to experiment on this and to figure out this power and how can we harness it and how can we that's what I believe it's for. So because everything is kind of centered around Baby Yoda, who's a Force user,
yeah,
I mean,
honestly, if they're smart, I think that what they should do is connect it to the Emperor. Because we know now that the Emperor is like hidden away. He's embodied this like decomposing corpse or whatever. And he was trying to go for the life force and all this stuff for Rey and Kylo. Well, if he finds out that there's this little baby Yoda thing that's like really strong in the Force, he's going to want to sap that because he knows how strong Yoda was.
Exactly. Ronaldo says, I think the problem with Luke appearing in The Mandalorian could be that the audience would be more focused in what Luke does and will lose interest in Mando. Absolutely.
That's been my point. Because there's two things that you have to balance with.
And I think that's why you can't bring Luke into it, because that will automatically, detract.
Well, and here's the problem, and this is the conundrum, actually, is the fact that sometimes you almost have to sacrifice some story stuff because of the fact that it could detract from what you're trying to do. So case in point, it might make perfect sense in universe, right? So along with the storyline, it might actually make sense to do it. But then you bring that point in. That it's like it's almost like it's too big. And again, it's using these guys to prop something up that doesn't need propping up.
That's why I say Ahsoka would be the best choice, because she's the least of, I mean, not everybody knows about her. One.
Well, and let's be honest too. This is a marketing thing.
Oh,
I mean,
of course, and it's
you got the
setup.
business thing. Like, okay, everybody loves Ahsoka. She's a fan favorite. Kind of like throwing Thrawn in Rebels. It's like, how can we, take this fandom to the next level? Oh, we do a live action Ahsoka.
Yeah, and of course, if you giving her own show, then that just kind of.
Well, now The Mandalorian essentially becomes a pilot for her show.
Yeah, it's a springboard for her. Yeah,
I mean, don't get me wrong, it makes perfect business sense. And what I like about it is, this is another thing. With The Mandalorian, they've actually been able to balance good business sense and good storytelling.
Absolutely.
See, it can be done.
Mm-hmm.
But my biggest issue is just don't shoehorn characters in just for the sake of the big moments. Like Baby Yoda, that was actually a really cool thing. And I'll tell you, but like my 3 funniest thing in the world was use the magic hands thing.
Man.
That cracks. That's actually one of the funniest lines in Star Wars.
Is that and that whole stormtrooper scene?
The flamethrower one?
No.
When he hits them?
The one when they were on the speeder bikes?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That whole conversation was great.
Yeah, the conversation was just priceless.
I mean, especially when they're talking about, do you want to go up there? I don't know, man. He just and then they were talking to the one guy and they heard him vaporize somebody or whatever. He's like, yeah, you know what? We'll just chill here. I mean, that.
Well, see, that's realistic, and that's what I love. That they made Star Wars.
That was like the best thing, because you actually got a realistic conversation, and it was hilarious because it's what you would be thinking if you were in this situation. My second favorite Baby Yoda moment. Well, they're not really favorites. This is like, okay, so that was the funniest. The coolest was when he blocked the flames from that flame trooper.
Oh, yeah.
That I thought was like, all right, that's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And the most shocking was the force choke thing.
Yeah.
When he's reaching out and you're like, oh, what's he going to do? And she starts like doing that. You're like, dude.
Well, not only that, but
it's like, that's pretty
Well, the fact that, like, when he uses the Force, like, it would tuck him out because he's so small.
Right.
And that was the other thing,
See,
too.
now that was actually a really cool storytelling moment, is the fact that they didn't make him some little all-powerful little thing,
Yeah.
It's
He's
like
not Stewie Griffin almost.
It's like Yoda need nap time.
Yep.
And those are all really cool things. I mean, there's just so many dynamics. That's the reason why it's nominated for all these awards. And I would just hate to see them. I'm already worried that they're shoehorning too much into it. Now, again, it's only because I trust Filoni and Favreau so much that I'm like, yeah, these guys know what they're doing. I don't need to do armchair, producing over here. I mean, I think that these guys are a lot more qualified than I am to decide what should go on in this stuff. But at the same time, as a fan, it's like, man, you got this really cool thing. I would just hate to see it be ruined.
Yeah.
By that. But I don't know. Did Ronaldo say anything else?
Nope.
I have to check these things.
No, we're good.
All right. Well, then I think that we're good. What do you guys think, about this whole thing? How do you think that Ahsoka survived Vader? Definitely, if you guys are watching the rebroadcast, leave a comment in the comment section. And if, you're chatting live or whatever, Ronaldo, that means you too. Let us know what you think. And then, of course, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit a like button on this video. All right. So you ready to go?
Yeah, man.
This
favorite.
is one of my favorites, and I think I need it today more than usual. All right. It's time to clear your mind. All right, so this is where we take questions from you guys. Now, besides the chatting, you can also send questions into us, and you can do that a variety of ways. You can hit us up at head-to-head-SW at all our social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Submit a question that way. You can write us, Star Wars at head-to-head-swpodcast.com. So you can send an email, kind of the old-fashioned way these days. And you can even join our Star Wars Facebook group, Head-to-Head Star Wars Community. Got a lot of you guys that are on that. That's really cool. We have some good discussions on that one. Or somehow, Daryl also gets some of these questions from, just... Yeah. And, hey, there's a lot of times where people just ask us, in person, and we just remember, write it down or whatever. So there's many ways that you guys can ask us. You can even leave in the comments on any of the videos. So if you guys have a question that you want featured on next week's show, leave it in the comments section right now, whether you're watching live or the rebroadcast, and we'll take care of it. So who's our first person?
Our first question comes from Tyler Henson. His question is, do you think we will see the Jedi Trials in a High Republic movie?
I don't think so. I actually don't think so, only because it just doesn't seem like it would necessarily be relevant for that particular time period.
I think it actually would be.
Really?
Yeah.
That's another Duel of the Fates we should have done. No, I don't think they're going to waste time with it, because you got to remember the Jedi that they're facing, or the Jedi that they're featuring in this film, in this book. Wow, dude. It's like my mind is like space today. But those Jedi are already, it's not like they're, Padawans or anything like that. I mean, and I think they're going to want to focus more on the story. They're not going to want to have to sit there and go, okay, here's, No,
what I mean, and I hear you. I think well, first of all, let me say this. We don't even know if there's going to be a High Republic movie. We just know they have books.
Yeah.
So but if we are going with this question, if they were to make a High Republic movie, do I think they would have the Jedi Trials? Yeah. I think this is a prime time to show that.
You think they would do it in the movie versus the books?
Yeah, I think they would, because I think you would show just at least some of it, because this is the high time of the Jedi. This is like their era. So it's like,
well, yes and no.
You can kind of see how they're actually.
Not really. Because don't forget, the Old Republic was actually like the true zenith of the Jedi.
Well, the High Republic era, I mean, this is their time when they are, they're practicing the peacekeeping thing. I mean, this is their main function. So there's no Sith around at this point. So if you're training, people, what are you training them on? You're training them to be peacekeepers. So you're training them to like learn how to be diplomatic. You're training them how to conquer their fears of certain things. I think you could see that, more so in this particular era, simply because this is kind of like you really don't have any major threats to the galaxy in the sense of like a Sith.
Well, we don't know though.
Well, they already said there aren't any Sith in this. So.
No, and I know they did allude to some like pirates or something like
pirates
that.
or like Dark Force users or something.
But hey,
like that.
There's a lot of people though that were a threat to Jedi that were not Sith.
True, but that's what I'm saying. Like, but I think, and in order to do that, like you can end up in situations where your fears can take over. So let's just say, let's say it's almost like a James Bond type situation where. They capture some Jedi and then they try to drown them or something like that. Like, okay, well, I don't have the Force. I can't battle you this, but I can lure you into this trap. Okay, well, let's say you're afraid of water. Let's say you're afraid of clothes and you're claustrophobic. You have to learn how to overcome those fears, and you get that training in the Jedi trials.
Well, yes, but now I could hang with the fact that maybe they'll show some training moments. I just don't think we're going to get a pure Jedi trial thing.
Oh, no. No, that's what I'm saying. They said, will we see the Jedi trials in it? And that's what I'm saying. I think you might see some, like, them working towards stuff or
yeah, maybe. I mean, it really, we'll get more of a sense of it when the books do come out. Mm-hmm. But I just don't think they're going to feature it too much. I think the closest that we got to that was that Clone Wars story arc. And that's another thing. They featured this stuff pretty heavily in the Clone Wars. Mm-hmm. And that's where it would be more appropriate to me. Especially when you actually look at the breakdown of the characters of the Jedi and the High Republic. They seem like they were these fully trained... I mean, granted, I know some of them were kind of young or whatever, but I don't know, they didn't seem like Padawan level, They seem more like Jedi Knight level.
Well, yeah, they are. And I think, but that's what I'm saying, but Knights take on... eventually, like, Knights and Masters do eventually take on Padawans.
Well, then you have to look at it from the standpoint of at what point. So, in other words, are we talking about the first batch of movies, or are we talking about, how many movies are they going to make of the High Republic, if they do any at all? That's number one. Number two, are you going to do that, say like in the first, say they do 2 trilogies of High Republic, right? Okay. First trilogy, maybe you don't get any of that. Second trilogy, maybe you do, depending on the story. Again, a lot of it depends on the story.
Yes.
All right. Well, what do we got next?
The next question comes from Adam Eubanks. His question is, should they make Grey Jedi canon?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, in a way, it depends on how you look at things. I guess it's kind of like
from a certain point of view.
Yeah, it's not really a black or white issue.
Oh.
I mean, it is kind of a gray thing because they, in some ways, they kind of have. I mean, Kanan, you could argue, is somewhat of a gray Jedi. Qui-Gon is basically somewhat of a gray Jedi. Ahsoka, without question, is more or less a gray Jedi. So it depends on what you mean. If you mean the term, I don't think the term will ever be canon.
Yeah.
But if you're talking about the concept, I think it already is.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I think I agree with you.
Bindu.
Well, yeah. I mean, and I don't even Rey, though. Because, that was one of the things that I think Luke and Yoda were basically trying to say is that, that was Luke's biggest issue, was the failure of the Jedi, because they were so dogmatic in their ideology as far as, you have to be this way. You can't have attachment. You can't do this.
You bring up a good point. You could actually make the argument that sequel trilogy Luke is also a gray Jedi. Well, he wasn't really anything at first, but I mean, if you had to pick it based on his philosophies, because he did cut himself off to the Force. But what I'm talking about is when he came back.
But yeah, even when he came back, though, I think he was still. I mean, it's kind of hard to say, because when you really don't know if he really believed everything, or maybe he was disillusioned. Because even in Rise of Skywalker, he said, "I was wrong."
Mm-hmm.
So you kind of don't know exactly. I mean,
That's
and
true.
obviously he was obviously on the light side because he's a Force spirit too. So it's, you kind of have to look at that too.
Well, I think he was really more or less. I mean, I could see where you're coming from because when he says I'm wrong, it's like, well, about
What part? Yeah,
Which
exactly.
part?
Yeah,
Because it's like, are you talking about in totality, or are you talking about certain things?
sections, right?
Yeah. You know what I think he was talking about when he just chucked his lightsaber and he didn't care.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it was kind of like he was like, look, you know. What he was actually, they really bring it up if you think about it, because he basically said, I was wrong. I ran away. I cut myself off. That's where he was wrong. I don't necessarily think he was saying that he was wrong about how he felt about the Jedi or what he saw as the weaknesses. I think he felt that he was wrong for turning his back on everybody and running instead of facing your fears, which is really what the Jedi are supposed to do, and that's what he was telling Rey. So it's interesting because the whole gray Jedi thing, even as early as the expanded universe, I mean, they had Kip Duran, they had whatever, man, I can't remember the guy's name from iJedi, but that was almost like that may have been the first time that term was used.
Well, I mean, like I said, I think even if you just look at modern times, I think Ahsoka is ideally like
Sure.
the quintessential like idea or personification of a great Jedi.
Well, and this is why she's the perfect person to put in the Mandalorian, because Mandalorians are sort of gray too. You know? I mean, to have somebody that's a little bit more basically
ambiguous.
Well,
Well,
yeah.
they just basically straddled the fence. I mean, that's basically, for those who don't know what great Jedi is, they're neither like
That's a good point. Maybe we should
Jedi
define it.
nor Sith, or
They're not light or dark.
They're not light or dark.
They're
They're
sort
just-
of in the middle. They're like neutral. You know, they'll
do some things. They'll use the dark side for some things because it's necessary.
Well, that's a good question, though. Do they really, or do they just use the light side of the Force, but
In a darker way.
well, not necessarily in a darker way, but just not necessarily. You know, it's not necessarily using the dark side. They're just more kind of a neutral. You know what I mean? They're not.
Well, I mean,
They do some shady, like they use the light side in some shady ways. That would be the best way to put it.
and I can't even really say they're shady because it's more like they're only
According to the Jedi.
I was about to
I'm
say,
talking
yeah, and I was about to say that's only according to the Jedi. So it's like if you're using the Force for other things other than peace, and other than self-defense.
Like wrong shady would be if they used it to steal stuff or whatever. But I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about what the Jedi would consider a little shady.
Mm-hmm.
You know, where it's not. And again, I think the whole reason why the Jedi brought that whole code on in the first place was, once again, it was noble because you had this great power, and you want to make sure that people are adhering.
Yeah, you're trying to use it in its
the
best
purest
pure form for humanity, almost.
Right, right.
And I think it's one of those things where some people will look at like the best way I kind of explain it is like Martin Luther King versus Malcolm X. Like both fighting for the same thing, they just have different methodologies and going about it. So I think, you look at Malcolm X, he wanted peace, he wanted those things, but he also wasn't afraid to fight for it. And, but whereas Dr. King was more of a turn the other cheek type thing, hands off approach. And that's more like the Jedi dogmatic kind of way of things. And I think where you don't necessarily have to be wrong in society, but just to the Jedi, it's kind of like, well, I wouldn't exactly would have done it that way.
Well, I think the biggest problem the Jedi had with it, because a lot of them did stuff, it was where it could lead. I think that's what they were afraid of.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you have it's almost like if you make the rule, you got to make it for everybody because, say like Obi-Wan could handle it, but, somebody else might take it too far, and then before you know it, they're a Sith. I mean, look, don't forget, Dooku was a Jedi once, right?
Yeah.
And it's kind of like their whole idea, and I think what it comes down to is a balance, because if you're too strict, you're going to push some of the people away.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're not strict enough, it's like, it's not so much that this one little thing that they're doing is so bad, but it's if you keep going down that path.
Yeah. It's
and
like,
that's
why
why
don't
I
I
think
have this power? Why can't I just do this?
Right.
And it's just like, well, you have to be. It's the Spider-Man thing. Like, with great power comes great responsibility.
Or look at the, like, say, forbidding attachments, that kind of thing. Now, in and of itself, it's like, well, what's the big deal? But it's like, but if you had the attachment, then you become afraid to lose it. And then that's letting,
and not only that, but it's like, it causes you to do things. Like, if someone does something to someone you are attached to, then you're more inclined. Or what if that person asks you to do something that's against what you believe, but because you love them, you do it because out of that love, out of that obligation.
Well, and it's kind of like you said, it also splits your loyalties a little bit,
Yeah.
Because it prevents you maybe from accomplishing this mission.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of like if you
and
just
that's what
don't.
Anakin was running into all the time.
Well, yeah, and basically what happens is you have a situation where, okay, if you don't have the attachments at all, you could just freely concentrate on the task at hand, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if you have somebody or something or whatever it is, now you have to consider that or that person's feeling or whatever, and it's like,
yeah, the best example.
It gets in the way.
The best example of that is Cougar from Top Gun, since we've been talking about Top Gun all day. Is the fact that, like, when that MiG freaked him out because he realized I could have this unborn kid, like
right.
I've never seen before. I got a family. Like, I have to think about this. With Maverick, he's like, I don't have anybody. My dad's dead. Everybody else is around. All I have is best friend Goose, and he's right behind me. So what's to lose?
Well,
for a little while. So
see,
yeah.
Goose probably had the best. Welcome to Top Gun, podcast. But basically, Goose actually had probably the best because he had a wife and kid.
Yep.
Now, granted, he was always telling Maverick, like, "Hey, man, don't screw this up for me."
Exactly.
But at the same time, and that's when he would reel him back. See, and this is where the Goose attitude would probably be good for even the Jedi, because his whole thing was like he was into having the fun and all the other stuff and being a little loose and cool, but he also knew, like, hey,
he had
man,
control though.
Yeah, because it's kind of like, look, if we go too far and we're thrown out of this program, now it's endangering my family's welfare and things like that, so we have to take it back a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's where this happens, is the fact that the forbidding attachment thing may not necessarily be the worst thing. I mean, even government agents,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times, when they're recruiting them, like the real deep guys,
yeah.
it's like, look, they don't want them to have families or
Yep.
anything like that, because number one, it distracts them. Number two, it's something the enemy could use against them.
Yep.
And that's another thing that you got to look at as a Jedi too, is that you don't want, some whatever to start holding people ransom, and now you make stupid decisions because you're trying to save them.
Yeah, and then also it's just when you have, and that's why they even tell you, like, with a lot of jobs, like, you can't fraternize with
Right.
other employees, because it's like it gets in the way.
You two have a fight, and suddenly the whole, it's like ruining the work and stuff.
Exactly.
It just depends on the stuff. So, I mean, whether or not they actually make the term, because I think that's the distinction that you have to make, is that are they going to make the term canon, or are they going to make the concept canon, or both?
Well, Ronaldo says the Grey Jedi were going to become canon in the original Episode 9 script, at least in concept. So at least Lucasfilm is thinking about them, maybe.
Yeah, well, and again, I would, like I said before, I would argue that they're already canon concept-wise.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, conceptually speaking, I honestly think that they kind of are.
Like I said, technically they are, because the Bendu, he says, I'm gray.
I'm in the middle.
He's like, I don't subscribe to either one.
Right. So, I mean,
By that,
from a certain point of view, they are canon. I think it's the term.
Mm-hmm.
The term is what everybody is really looking at.
Right.
Because once you actually utter the phrase Grey Jedi in a canon source, now you're talking about there's a definitive thing. Because, it's just like this. We all call him Baby Yoda.
Mm-hmm.
It's not his name.
Right.
And they're not going to make the name canon.
No.
But yet everybody calls him that.
True. That's a good point.
And now, that's where I think that this whole thing is basically going. And guess what? Even when we find out his name, we're all going to call him Baby Yoda still. That's just his name forever. It's sort of like the Mandalorian. What is it? It's like right on the tip of my tongue. His actual name. Oh man, it's like right there. It's no, it's Jin. Something Jin.
Sounds like probably had some gin.
Yeah, right. But okay, we find out his name in like episode 7 or something. Well, we're still calling him the Mandalorian.
Yep.
Or Mando, because that's what Grief calls him. Darius Jin? Is that it?
Din Djarin.
Or something. I don't know. I'm like hitting
Din Djarin.
Din Djarin, that's it. Yeah, I was
Close. Close. Djarin, whatever.
Din Djarin. So, again, I didn't even remember his name.
Because we all call him Mando.
Because we all call him the Mandalorian.
Yep.
Or Mando. You know, it's like, and that's, so whether or not we call these people gray Jedi or not, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I mean,
We just know if you're in the middle, you're a gray Jedi.
yeah, and that's what everybody's going to call them no matter what. In fact, in the High Republic or in some other, either
Medium,
book, movie, TV series or whatever, they may actually have a name for them. We're not going to call them that. I mean, we might. I mean, I guess it depends.
We're so disrespectful.
I mean, I'm just saying, it's like once you get something in the consciousness that spreads, and that's the magic of Star Wars. The magic of Star Wars is the fans basically take over and create their own thing, and it's like, I mean, that's where the expanded universe came from. Because if you really look back at the expanded universe, not a whole lot of that was ever canonized. Lucas always said, well, I let you guys write these things and I license them out, but it's all fan fiction in reality.
Mm-hmm.
But yet we're over there talking about all these characters like
they matter.
They actually are real and that they matter or whatever. And it's like, because they do, because they've been released.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as Lucas was concerned, a lot of that stuff didn't happen. His whole thing was, where he basically balanced it out, was he said, okay, it can be canon to you until I then, like the Boba Fett thing. Boba Fett's backstory was way different in the expanded universe, and it stood there for a long time until Lucas was like, just kidding, episode 2 comes out, and boom.
Mm-hmm.
Completely nullifies the whole thing. And trust me, we had to really get used to that.
Yeah.
We were just like sitting there going, man, it was somewhat traumatic. I'm not kidding. It was traumatic for a lot of us Star Wars fans at that point because we had held that, I don't really want to say sacred, but, that was the thing.
Mm-hmm.
That was what it was. And now it wasn't. So with the Gray Jedi thing, it's sort of like, yeah, they could actually come up with a term for it or whatever. It's still going to be Gray Jedi. Everybody's going to say that.
Yeah.
And who knows? Maybe, Disney might be like, screw it, just call him the Gray Jedi. It's like, why not? Everybody's already saying it anyway. Why reinvent the wheel?
Right.
So, I don't know. I think that that's just pretty much the way it is. But, hey, man, this has really been kind of a good yet heated at times show. Hopefully you guys are enjoying it. This is one of those things this is why I really love doing this show, because you get to really sit there and dig into this stuff. And this is what separates us, by the way, from, in case you haven't figured this out yet, this is pretty much what separates us from a lot of the other shows, is that this is all about just getting into a lot of the philosophy, a lot of the other stuff of Star Wars, and basically, essentially, just having a conversation about Star Wars in front of you guys.
Yep.
And because we're live and you can chat in, as Ronaldo has been doing for many weeks now.
Yep.
You guys can all join in and join the discussion, and it can get crazy. I know sometimes we have 3.5 hour shows because of it.
Mm-hmm.
But, next week, who knows what's going to happen next week?
Yeah, especially if we get a trailer.
We get a trailer, we might cover that. So, it's a little loose because we never know what we're going to find out. But, hopefully you guys join us next week. We're going to be right back here Friday night at 8 o'clock. And, I'm sure we're going to have a lot more stuff that we're going to be able to cover that's going to be equally as crazy as everything we found out this week. So, with that said, we're going to see you guys next week. I am Eric Vansel.
I'm Daryl Sanders.
May the Force be with you.
Always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter @HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.